Good afternoon. My name is John Wyatt. As Rex said, I'm Director of External Relations here at the agency. And in that capacity, my team and I work to try to advance higher education policy and funding with the legislature, specifically those policies that are going to help us achieve our 60 by 30 goals. So I have a slideshow here I'm going to go through, but I'd like to keep this kind of as informal as possible. So if you have any questions as I go along, any points you want to make to illustrate what we're talking about, please feel free to just raise your hand, and let's try to make this as much of a conversation as possible. So as you hopefully know, we are on the cusp of legislative session. So the Texas legislature meets for about 5 months every 2 years, every odd-numbered year. And this is some of the dates to be aware of for the 86th Texas legislature. Pre-filing. So even though the legislature doesn't convene until January, there's the opportunity beginning on November 12th for legislators to introduce bills. Legislators who are continuing, those who were newly elected in the election, will be able to actually start filing legislation November 12th. And that's when you're going to get your first picture of kind of what the field of play is in terms of higher education legislation. So some legislators are very interested in filing their legislation early. You know, some legislators actually, they wait in line on November 12th to have that low bill number. That's something that they like to brag about. But that's when you're going to get your first glimpse of what's actually being introduced that's going to be relevant to your institutions. January 8th is when the session actually begins. They will convene on January 8th and will immediately do nothing because those first few weeks are about getting organized. So I say do nothing, but behind the scenes, they're going to be figuring out who's going to be sitting on what committees. They're going to be figuring out hearing schedules. The most important thing they're going to be deciding on the House side is who's going to be the speaker. So we have, Speaker Strauss is stepping down. So there's going to be a race to decide who's going to be speaker on the House. And whoever wins that race is going to have a lot of influence over who's going to be chairing the various committees. So that's going to take up a lot of January, and it'll usually be late January and into February where you'll first start having legislative hearings. And so that's where they'll actually start bringing up bills, discussing bills, amending them in committee, and moving them forward through the process. The last day to file legislation is March 8th. So any legislation that has not been filed by March 8th cannot be considered by the legislature. There are ways to get around that. You could offer it as an amendment to another bill. So it's not as hard as a deadline as it looks, but it is an important one. Sine die, that is when the legislature adjourns. That's May 27th. And then June 16th is the signing deadline. So that is the last date on which the governor can sign legislation into law. Anything that has not been signed into law as of that date is dead. So what are they going to be talking about during this legislative session? Well, we can get a couple of ideas. One thing to look at is the interim charges that both the House and the Senate Higher Education Committees looked at during this interim. So the interim charges are given to the committees so that they can hold hearings before the session, discuss potential policy in these areas, and what they'll do is they'll draft an interim report that should come out by the end of the year that states the committee's recommendations or positions on these items. So they've had hearings on all of these issues. Our commissioner and staff presented at several of them. But for the House, you can see there some of the issues that they may be concerned about are Hurricane Harvey response, sexual misconduct policies on campuses, dual credit, innovation, educator prep programs, and then the 60 by 30 and community college baccalaureates. They're certainly not limited to these issues. They're going to look at a lot more, but these are particular items that they have identified as something they want to take a look at. For the Senate, transfer is one of their interim recommendations. The role of the state in overseeing new higher education locations. Looking at funding models, particularly competency-based and performance funding. Examining regulations, and also dual credit. So the one common one you have between those two is dual credit. And that's going to be frankly, it's going to be the big issue in higher ed this session. So the coordinating board develops a set of funding and policy recommendations for each session. And those recommendations, they've been adopted by our board and will form the basis for what we're going to be working with the legislature in trying to advance. And I've got some slides here with just a subset of those recommendations that are particularly relevant to the two-year sector. Formula funding recommendations. So the coordinating board is actually required by statute before each session to come up with recommendations for appropriate funding levels for the GAIs, the CTCs, the state colleges, and the health-related institutions. So we did that through our Formula Advisory Committee process, working with stakeholders from the community. And what our board ended up adopting is up there. So for community colleges, our board recommended increases to reflect enrollment growth and inflation, maintaining the core operations funding at the same amount, but then increasing student success funding to $215 per point. I can tell you for our commissioner and for our board, increasing that student success funding is critical because the legislature has not kept up with the original intent of student success points, which was to fund them at a level, at the same level, so that your performance would increase your funding. So we think it's very important that we get back to that original intent of the student success point model. For technical colleges, with the return value formula, we're recommending funding 35% of the return value. Again, that would get us to where we were when the return value formula was first enacted, so that the success of our technical colleges would be reflected in their funding. We're also recommending increases for growth and inflation, and that dual credit hours be funded on a contact hour basis. The current return value formula doesn't really account for dual credit. So this came out of the Formula Advisory Committee, a recommendation that just dual credit be funded on contact hour. And then for state colleges, we are recommending that we fund projected growth and inflation. So really kind of across the board, the focus of our board is recognize that there are increased costs associated with enrollment growth and inflation and fund those, but then also fund incentives for student success. And so that's the philosophy that we have, and we will be making that case with the legislature this session. Some of the policy recommendations we have, Texas Works. This is actually a recommendation that we had last session that we're bringing back. We're recommending that the current Texas College Work Study program be modified so that the current off-campus component of that program would be consolidated into Texas Works. So that just for that off-campus component, we would have a program here at the coordinating board that would identify employers that are offering meaningful work study opportunities with marketable skills, and would be able to connect those employers with students who are interested in those programs. So the goal here is to more efficiently manage the program. I know there's been a lot of concern about that off-campus requirement at institutions, but also to incentivize employers to offer and students to accept internship programs that are going to help them develop their marketable skills. As you know, that's one of our 60 by 30 goals, and work experience is one of the fundamental ways we can help impart those marketable skills. Student transfer. So this is probably the issue that legislators raise the most with us. Pretty much every session in the first hearing that we're at, we will be asked, what are you doing about transfer? Because this is what legislators hear about. You know, when they're home in their district, what they hear is that, hey, you know, Tommy took, 30 semester credit hours at the community college, and now that he's transferred to the university, they're saying this doesn't apply to his degree. What's going on? So there was a lot of push last session to try to do something to address more efficient transfer. Ultimately, very little was adopted. One thing we did get at the coordinating board was some additional funds for our fields of study work. So that was very important. But we think there's a lot of room for new policies that can help incentivize transfer. And one of the focuses we have is restructuring the core curriculum to get it back to what it really was meant to be originally, which is both a general education core curriculum, but also a transfer vehicle. And how can we do that? So some of the things we're proposing are creating statewide specialized cores so that students would have a better sense of specifically what courses within a core they can take that are going to help lead toward their ultimate degree. Potentially reducing the number of hours in the core curriculum to focus it more directly and provide some more flexibility. We're also looking to require institutions to embed information about fields of study courses in their degree programs so that students will know about fields of study as well as which courses are fields of study and how they apply. We're also looking at supporting an interactive online degree site so that students could be able to input their majors and receive a list of the required courses needed for a degree so that they would have that information available. Requiring institutions to provide course requirements to the coordinating board, including whether they satisfy core curriculum and fields of study. And then studying the feasibility of a transfer admissions guarantee. Again, that's something we want to look at. We're not proposing anything specific right now, but potentially that could be a tool for making sure that transfer is more effective for students. So I do anticipate there's going to be a lot of conversation about transfer this session and what can we do to help students transfer effectively. You know, one of the challenges we have with transfer is there's no silver bullet, however much the legislature wants a silver bullet. There are different reasons why students accumulate excess hours. There are different populations of students that need different kinds of interventions. So what we're trying to do at the coordinating board is use the tools we have and then propose those additional tools that will help us get at the problem, even if it's not something that can ever be 100% solved. And then I mentioned dual credit. So I do anticipate there's going to be a lot of conversation about dual credit this session. You may be aware that at our board meeting on Thursday, we're going to have a major policy discussion regarding dual credit. We're going to have the author of the AIR study on dual credit, Dr. Trey Miller, is going to be on that panel. The author of the UT study, Dennis Troutman, is going to be on that panel. We're going to have Jacob Frede from TAC on that panel, as well as Julie Edmonds, who's at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and is an expert on early college high schools. So hopefully that conversation is going to help us have a robust consideration of the different reports and studies that have looked at this. What do they have in common? What sort of policy recommendations can we all agree are important for us to focus on? But the coordinating board has come up with some recommendations that we'll be carrying forward. Requiring high school students to demonstrate college readiness on one of the three assessments, the SAT, the ACT, or the TSIA. The reason for this recommendation is really reflected in the AIR study's outcomes finding. So the AIR study found that students who were less academically well prepared did not benefit nearly as much from dual credit, or it even had a negative impact once they actually arrived on that college campus. So the goal here is to ensure that students who are taking dual credit have met the college readiness standards. Currently, it is possible to take dual credit without having a college readiness score on one of these examinations, so our goal is to require that. But we also recognize that there's concern that these tests have fees associated with them. And so what we're exploring is how can we make sure that students who are poor are not penalized and are unable to take these exams and therefore unable to access dual credit. So we're looking at trying to find funding, a last dollar effort to complement the already existing pool for subsidizing these exams so that everyone will have access to these exams. And then our final recommendation on dual credit is to expand the current requirement for students to file a degree plan at 30 semester credit hours to academic dual credit. So as you know, the requirement was that after 30 hours on the campus, I believe the next semester you have to file a degree plan, but dual credit is exempted from that. And we have students acquiring 30, 40, 60 hours of dual credit in high school. So the goal here is to ensure that students in dual credit are taking it thoughtfully, that they're taking dual credit in an organized manner and toward a specific goal. So one of the concerns that came out of the AIR study was the nature of advising around dual credit. It varies tremendously. It largely falls on the high school counselors. And as we all know, high school counselors are dealing with 400 plus students, and they're counseling on not just academics, but behavior, mental health, et cetera. So they may not have the opportunity to provide the quality advising that a student needs. By having a degree plan requirement, we know at the very least that student is going to have to consider, what is my dual credit leading me toward? And then they can put on a degree plan that's going to help them make decisions based on, this is where I want to go with my degree. So that's all I had. And I'll mention a couple of other things that you're likely to hear about during this legislative session. As always, the Hazelwood exemption is likely to be discussed. The challenge with the Hazelwood exemption is that it is very popular, understandably, with our veterans community, and that makes it very difficult to change. But certainly you've seen over the last couple of sessions that the legislature has heard the concern. Possibly they may look at doing something, possibly increasing the state subsidy to make up for some of that. But it will definitely be a topic of conversation. Another topic that may well come up is undocumented students in higher education. As you know, currently, undocumented students have the ability to be considered state residents for higher education purposes if they graduate from a Texas high school and attended for the 3 previous years. That's been a contentious issue in the legislature. This last session, there was actually a bill in the Senate that would have created a new grant program, and an amendment was added to that bill that said that you had to be eligible for federal financial aid to receive that grant. The intent of that was to remove undocumented students from that grant program. So any legislation around any of our grant programs will be susceptible to that amendment. So potentially you could be looking at that coming up again this next session, as well as attempts to address the issue more directly. Will we see that? A lot of that's going to depend on who's sitting in what chairs. As I said, we're going to have a new cast over on the House side, probably some pretty substantial changes in chairmanships. I don't anticipate nearly as much change on the Senate side, but you never know who's going to actually have that gavel until the session actually starts. So I've talked way too much. I want to hear what your thoughts are. What are your concerns? What are your questions for the session? And what can I answer for y'all?
In honor of Don Perry, seriously, this may be jumping the gun a bit because I see you have fields of study to be talked about tomorrow, but we're all aware that there was a letter written to SACS protesting fields of study that it might be in violation of SACS principles, and it's our understanding that Dr. Whelan responded back that no, it's not against fields of study so long as the committees are truly representative of the institutions and that the concerns of any universities are answered. Has there been any response back to the to SACS or the complaining universities, and are we moving forward with fields of study?
I have to defer to Rex on that one.
So I'll start with the last. Yes, we are moving forward with fields of study. I have not heard of such a letter from Bell Whelan back to us that said everything was okay. So if you have that, I would love to see it. If any of you have that letter. We did get a letter from SACS that came to the commissioner and came to the board inquiring about what we were doing. And so I crafted a response to that, and the commissioner and I are working out the response to go back to SACS about it. Since what we're doing in fields of study is not terribly different from what has gone on already in a lot of states outside of Texas, I don't really anticipate SACS saying anything negative about it. But you never know for sure what will happen. But as I said, I have not seen. We're proceeding as though SACS will say everything is okay, because I fully expect them to do that, but that's my personal opinion on this, and we won't really know what the opinion of SACS is until they tell us what it is. But I have not seen such a letter about saying everything is okay, so.
And as I mentioned earlier, the legislature is very invested in fields of study. They provided us funding with a specific understanding that we would identify those top 25 transfer majors and have fields of study in place by the session, which we are on track to do so. So it would be nice to make sure the accreditor is on board as well.
The letter that we have seen says that it's not in violation of SACS principles to have a committee composed of university and community college faculty make these recommendations.
And that's good news, I think. But like I said, I have not seen that letter. So if you've seen it and you could give me a copy of that, I would appreciate it.
I'll email it to you.
And I suspect that when we send our response back to SACS on all this, we'll probably get the same letter back from them as well. So, good.
Any other questions or just comments? Anything? When you think about the legislative session, what are your concerns? What are what opportunities do you see? Where do we need to improve in this state that needs to be brought to the legislature's attention? The commissioner, he's gonna testify probably at just about every higher ed hearing. And y'all aren't necessarily going to have that opportunity. So now's your chance to let us know. What should we be highlighting when the commissioner's up there at the dais? Okay. Well, let me say I'm always available. If you ever want to email me, it's john.wyatt@thecb.state.tx.us. I mentioned hearings, so the commissioner will be testifying, but it is important for you to also know every legislative hearing has an opening for public testimony. So if there's an issue where you feel your institution needs to have a voice, you're always welcome to register to provide that testimony at a hearing. And I do think it's important for legislators to hear directly from y'all. The coordinating board, we recommend policy, but you're in their districts, and you really represent an important part of their constituency. So make sure your legislators know where you stand on these issues, and you're gonna help yourselves and you're gonna help your students. All right. Thank y'all.
And a question, how many of y'all, is this your first meeting? Is this the first time you've came to this? Oh, 1, 2. We're just trying to figure out who we can get to put the chairs up at the end of the day, really and truly. Now, I do hope that you get out of this meeting that, as Rex said, it's supposed to be a dialogue, it's supposed to be a conversation, it's supposed to be an information exchange. If we start using acronyms or terms or abbreviation or whatever you're not familiar with, you're welcome to just, throw up the hand. We have people with microphones that, we do try to get the questions through the microphone, primarily for the broadcasting. But it's supposed to be about when you leave here tomorrow, you're so informed about this place that you really do think we're great. No, wait, we are great. Never mind. Anyway, Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner, Strategic Planning and Funding, is going to go ahead and start her presentation. I'm talking to the commissioner's staff. The commissioner's going to come down and talk at some point, so I don't know exactly where we are in that, but we may get halfway through this presentation and ask the commissioner to share a few words, or we may finish this presentation. So we'll know more in 30 minutes, I guess. Julie?
But I will, of course, defer to the commissioner when he steps in. Yes. Hello, it's great to be here and to see many familiar faces. As Gary mentioned, I am the Assistant Commissioner in the Strategic Planning and Funding Division, and we're the data folks. So I have lots of things to share with you related to our data. The first part of the presentation is just an update on where we are with the 60 by 30 text plan. And I say just an update because I think much of this information is information you will have already heard before. If you listen to our board meetings or our CAP meetings, you've heard some of this. But I do know we have some new folks, and it never hurts to hear it again and sort of of ground yourself in where are we now and where do we need to be. So I'll spend some time on that, and then I've got some updates that will be new for all of you in terms of some things that we're doing with data and that we're looking at, particularly related to our website and 8-week courses. So in terms of the 60 by 30 text plan, overall, we're doing very well in terms of plan goals and targets, but of course this is very early in the process. And before I provide some details, let me give you a few key insights. First of all, we have positive indicators for all our goals and targets in 2017. The 60 by 30 the 60 by 30 educated population goal, which is our overarching goal, and the completion goal both showed strong improvements and at the rates needed to reach 2030 goals. Our completions for male and for economically disadvantaged students grew modestly, but they're falling behind needed progress. Direct enrollment from high school increased slightly after a 2-year decline, but this still requires additional attention. In fact, I think this is the area that we probably need to particularly focus on in terms of where we said we needed to be and where we are now. And then the marketable skills and student debt goals remain steady in terms of where we need to be, although for our excess semester credit hour reductions, we will need to pick up the pace if we're going to reach our targets in 2030. So here's a slide that shows where we are with data. In light blue, you're going to see a summary of the progress that has been made towards reaching the goals of the plan. And in yellow, you can see the benchmarks. So that's where we need to be in 2020 and 2025, and then, of course, to get to the, where we need to be in 2020, it shows on this slide, and then it shows where we need to be in 2030 to reach our goal or our final targets. And we do have the 2025 benchmarks available online if you need those. So this slide looks more closely at the 60 by 30 educated population goal. And by the way, these slides that we're moving into are slides that came off of 60by30text.com. You should be familiar with that website. And if you ever need to pull data for your region or statewide and actually have a graph or chart, you can drop right into a PowerPoint. There's a way to go on that website and just pull the information straight from there. So right here, we're looking at the 60 by 30 goal. And you can see that we're at 42.3% of our Texas residents ages 25 to 34 who hold at least a certificate and of course higher. And this is for 2016. So one thing that's important to remember with this attainment data in terms of our educated population goal is that we're always a couple of years behind in terms of when we get the data from the American Community Surveys. So when people talk about we're on track to get where we need to be, and that's in fact where we are right now. We need to grow at 1.3 percentage points a year, and we have grown. We grew from last year to this year at 1.3 percentage points. If we continue that, we will reach our goal by 2030, but of course that data won't come in for a little bit later after that. So if you add it up and you're not quite getting there, it's because, remember, we're looking at 2016 data now. The 2017 is in this fall, some of it that we use, not all of it, so we should very shortly be able to have an update on where we are related to that. In terms of completion, students of all ages at Texas public, independent, and career higher education institutions completed nearly 334,000 certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees in fiscal year 2017. So when we look at completions, we don't just look at those 25 to 34-year-olds, we look at all completions. This was an increase of 3.9% since 2016, and that's actually where we need to be as well to hit our 550,000 is about 3.9% per year. So again, it's early in the process, but we are on track, and we hope we can continue. Now, bachelor's degrees comprise the largest proportion of credentials in 2017, but associate completers increased the fastest by almost 5%. And completions increased in every sector of higher education that we track, except for career schools. They had a small decrease of about 300, but we have had some changes in terms of what's happening with our career schools. We also saw some changes come in with Sarah in terms of the data that we collect, so that actually didn't come as a surprise. Okay, this slide shows the targets that fall under our completion goal. As I said before, all the target populations increased, although the size of that growth varied across groups. So Hispanic students exceeded the estimated number of completions needed to stay on track for the 2030 target. African American students completed almost 6% more credentials than in the previous year. Males completed about 4% more credentials, but their share of statewide completions increased only slightly to 42.4%. And by 2030, we aim for half of the 550,000 needed credentials to be earned by males. So we have a ways to go there. Economically disadvantaged students saw their undergraduate credentials grow by 4,700 credentials. That still left these undergraduate credentials about 800 short of the estimated progress needed for that year, with needed increase of we need about 7,300 a year for the next 3 years to reach our 2020 benchmark. And I do want to mention that at our board meeting, Dr. Jenna Cullinane-Hagee will be doing a presentation on our economically disadvantaged students. We do get folks who get a little confused about the numbers with that, because if you look in our almanac, if you look at a snapshot year, we're at about 35% of our students who are enrolled receive Pell, and we use Pell as a proxy for economic disadvantage. But then if you look at the plan, we're looking at completions. And when we track back from completions, over 50% of our completers receive Pell. So sometimes folks get a little confused when they see the numbers for Pell, economically disadvantaged students, trying to keep that straight. So we actually have a presentation that will be going on at the board meeting, and it'll be available online. And we also have a 2-pager about that we'll post with our insight brief. So just be aware that it's important to understand when you're looking at completers, they're much more likely at some point over their education to have received Pell. Okay, and it looks like there we go. So did I have this slide up before, or did I click ahead too? I apologize. Okay, so now we're moving on to the high school to college enrollment. As I said, we saw a slight uptick, but we saw declines for a couple years in a row. Have been concerned about that. We did get some good news from our Advised Texas evaluation that our schools with advisors actually have seen increases, and that's very encouraging because those advisors are in schools with low college going rates, those schools that traditionally have the fewest students going to college. But this is an area that needs work. Dr. Cullinane-Hagee will be talking tomorrow about some of the regional efforts going on around the plan, and I know each region was asked to focus on that target as well as our 60 by 30 and our completion goals. So this just shows kind of where we are. Okay, so in terms of our marketable skills goal, it states that all graduates of Texas public institutions will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. Some institutions have made substantial progress towards identifying marketable skills. Others are just beginning to develop a process for identification. And a target related to this goal is the percent of graduates remaining in Texas who we find working or enrolled during the first fiscal year following graduation. The target is 80% through the plan, so that the target is to keep us where we are. And we've seen consistent employment outcomes in terms of this percentage. It's been at about 79% the last couple of years. And then in terms of our student debt as a percent of first-year wage, so we talk about this as our student debt goal. The goal is to keep median undergraduate debt, and this excludes students who have no loan debt. The goal is to keep it to no higher than 60% of first-year wages, and you can see where we've been for the last couple of years. Again, this is a goal to try to remain where we are and make sure that we don't have a situation where we have debt escalating and wages not keeping up. Supporting the development of recommendations of the Financial Aid Literacy Company and open educational resources are two ways the coordinating board is helping to maintain manageable student debt. So I just thought I'd mention that. And then one of the targets under the student debt goal is to limit the proportion of undergraduate students with debt to no more than half. This is an important target because you've got a goal a student debt goal that just looks at students with debt. So it's important to make sure that we also are monitoring how many students actually have debt overall. So this is something we'll be tracking over time. We've actually seen that decline for the second year in a row. It's 47.2%, and right now the target has been to keep it at that 50% threshold or below. So again, and the other thing I want to mention in terms of this, the state isn't saying that all debt is bad. Student debt can be an important component of degree completion, but we're also pleased to see that this is holding fairly steady. Okay, and in terms of our target around excess semester credit hours, of course, another way to manage debt is to reduce excess semester credit hours, and that's why this particular target sits under the student debt goal, but it also is an important part of completion. And I see the commissioner has arrived, and so I'd be happy to let him break in if he'd like. Oh, nope, he's telling me to continue. So I want to mention that in fiscal year 2017, we had an average excess hour drop from 27 to 26 for our associate degree completers. So of course those are mainly people at your institutions. And we also saw a drop from 19 to 18 overall. We went from 14 to 13 for our bachelor's degree completers at our universities. So we are moving in the right direction in terms of this target. But as I said earlier, we have a ways to go, and we're going to need to pick up the pace to get to that 2020 benchmark of 12 excess semester credit hours. We did a recent analysis, and it showed that for every semester credit hour decrease, approximately $16 million in general revenue could be repurposed for other efforts, including supporting student success. So gathering these data is important for tracking the plan, but it's also important to widely share them to inform institution state-level policy and practice improvements. So for the Division of Strategic Planning and Funding, the strategic use of data to support the plan is a top priority. And specifically, in addition to analyzing plan-related data, we're packaging the data in user-friendly formats on the 60by30text.com website, which I mentioned earlier, in our revised accountability system, which you all should be aware of, and I presented on that to the liaisons last year, but if you're new, take a look at our revised system, and also in our ever-popular almanac. So that's the presentation in terms of where we stand on our 60 by 30 progress, but let me provide you a little additional information on a couple of topics that I think will be of interest. First of all, most of you have, I'm sure, seen our redesigned coordinating board website. We are actually working behind the scenes to redesign our data website, so that texashighereddata.com website where most of the coordinating board data lives, and it's quite a packed front page. We are actually aligning a redesign of that to go with the agency website, so it should all fit together. This is what you're going to be seeing soon. It should be out there in the next few weeks. We may ask a few folks who work with data to give it a test run for us, so don't be surprised if we get in touch with a few folks at institutions. But the key piece for this is we're going to it's much less busy on the main page, but rely on those drop downs across the blue bar, and that's where you're going to be able to dig in and find the data that has been there in the past. And right now, we've got staff working on a legacy page too, so for a little while we'll show both. So if you get in there and can't find something you use all the time, you can jump back to that legacy page and try to figure out where it is. So I just wanted everyone to know that's coming. We'll be talking about it at TACRO, the Texas Association of College Registrars and Admissions Officers. I'm actually going to be there in a couple of weeks, and we'll also be letting the folks know at TAIR, at the Texas Association for Institutional Research. And by then it'll have been out for a while, and I'm sure they'll have lots of suggestions for improvement, and we'll be sure to listen to their suggestions. So now I'm going to get into a topic, and I think I'm actually glad the commissioner's here when I mention this. We are going to try really hard this year to get our data in and certified in a timely manner so that with the session coming, we're able to try to get our almanac out on time or ahead of schedule. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending notifications out to schools, just automatic notifications if data is late in terms of certification dates. And what we decided to do for this, and this is why it's really important that you're all here to hear this, is we decided that the first notification is going to go to the chief reporting official. Let them know, hey, your data is late. That's going to come in at a couple weeks after the due date. But then 3 weeks after the due date, which is really when it starts to get pretty critical for us in terms of running our data, especially during the holidays before Christmas to get it out there, we're going to send a notification to all of you. a notification to the liaisons. We will copy the reporting official. Some of you may be the reporting official, so you'll be getting it twice. But this is going to be important for you to know, hey, something's late. Let me check and see what's going on. You know, we'll leave it up to your judgment whether it's time to bring in the executive officer, you know, bring in the president, bring in others on the president's staff. Maybe you are on the president's staff, or whether you just want to work with the reporting official at that point. But I didn't want you to be surprised when you started receiving these, because this is going to be new for us to be sending them just automatically. We do sometimes send letters, but this will be automatic at a certain point in time. Even if your folks have been in touch with us and told us, hey, this is what's going on, if we're working with you, that's really important. We appreciate it. We like to know why things are late, but we just want to make sure we follow through with an official notification so that folks know up the line. And then after you all get this, if the data hasn't been certified within a week, we will send something under my name to the president. So again, we appreciate your efforts to help us get the data in. As we have so many institutions at this point, it's just critical that it be sent in time so that we can run all the numbers. And as it says in the notification, if even one institution is late, I think it's in there, yeah, it means we can't do statewide data for all the institutions. We can't answer legislative requests with the newest data for all the institutions if we don't have everyone. And then we have to start making some tough decisions if we don't have it, like not including your institution's data or using a prior year. And we don't like to do that. We really like to have everyone's data and have our data be accurate. So just wanted to let you know we're doing that. And the other thing that's happening is we are doing a pilot for reporting 8-week courses. We have had Odessa College, which has been doing 8-week courses for several years now, and during the last legislative session, we kind of use a proxy for them for formula funding, because they were the only school that was really doing a large number. But now we have other institutions who are doing it or who are interested in doing it, and so we are piloting some approaches for reporting the error-free hours for formula funding. We're piloting them with the LBB, and we're going to see how it all goes in terms of what the numbers look like. I believe we have 4 schools that have talked to us about the 8-week courses. So if you're not one of them, you don't have to worry about it for this fall. I'll be sending out some notification about what we're doing, so schools who are interested for next year will have an idea. And then, of course, once the LBB makes a final determination for the numbers they're going to use, then we'll let people know. This also means your business officers, when they get the numbers we send out about the formula funding dollars, your business officers are going to see some schools that have a couple sets of numbers. And I don't want them to get nervous because it just means it's for those schools who are doing the 8-week courses, and we're running the numbers a couple different ways under this pilot to make a determination of how their contact hours are going to be reported. So again, something new that's coming. It won't affect most of you, but those numbers will be out there, and down the line, something to keep in mind. And I had a couple notes about this that I think are important. First of all, some advantages of the 8-week courses is that you can get obviously people have been able to report courses as flex whenever they start if they aren't able to report them in the fall. However, they're not able, if something starts too late in the past, then haven't been able to get the data to us in time to meet our deadlines. And so we are working with institutions to be flexible about that, and we're giving them a little bit of extra time. Institutions that are participating will adjust our letters that go out based on that, but we're giving them some extra time for reporting, but it's still a very tight reporting turnaround. So if you're just doing a few 8-week courses, it makes more sense to continue reporting as flex. But if you're going to do something like Odessa and have 80% of your courses be 8-week courses, or maybe not that high, but a high number, you might want those enrollments to be included in the fall. And we just wanted you to know where we are, again, working with some other institutions now that are doing it, and we're going to, once we figure out the funding piece, we'll let everyone know what the approach will be for that. So an advantage is you can get those students into your fall cohort and reported for enrollment, and a disadvantage is that it's tighter timeline for reporting, and your reporting officials really have to be on top of things. Okay, and this slide is really, it's very detailed. I'm not going to go into detail, but I just wanted you to have it. These are the 2 pilots that we're doing right now with the LBB in terms of what we're going to be reporting to them for second 8-week courses. So again, I'm happy to be around and answer any questions if you have them later, but I won't spend too much time on that, but I wanted to make you aware of that. And then the final thing I wanted you to be aware of is that we did have a negotiated rulemaking committee come in last December to look at reporting requirements. Were any of you involved in that work? I know we had folks from institutions around the state. We had several two-year colleges. What we did, and it was, for the most part, I think it was a good group. We tried to have a mixed group, but it was mostly our folks who were our chief reporting officials or our IR folks, people from student services, a range of folks who report information to the coordinating board. We compiled a list of about 93 data requests that routinely happen either annually or biannually. We had people from the institution propose some data that they thought might not be needed anymore, and we added that to the list. And so what we did is then we worked through the list, and some decisions were made about what would be recommended for deletion in terms of data requests. And this slide provides sort of what those recommendations look like, the types of changes needed. So there are 7 that will require potential statutory change, and in fact, we have provided John Wyatt with those recommendations, so we will write up legislative recommendations to try to make those changes, because that's the only way they're going to happen. I think 2 were riders and the other 5 are statute. We have 4 board rule changes. I think some of those have already happened or they're in process. We had 7 that determined feasibility of process changes, and some of those involved reporting in different manuals and in different ways, and again, that's something we've had a couple of work group, and some of those were Rex's too as well, I think, in terms of looking at, hey, is this something that is going to make sense? And we're making progress on all of those. And then we've got 4 where resulted in CBM manual changes. We've already notified institutions. And 5 we're receiving work group study. And one of those was to look at IFRS and the college student budget and some of those data that we collect from business officers that don't necessarily match with the FADs. So we had a great group from institutions around the state helping us with that work group. Their work is just now wrapping up. You might have seen some emails to the liaisons about that. And then we have a long-term work group that's looking at our CBM manuals to see if we can try to align them a little better over the year, and to see if we can reduce some of the reporting requirements. And for those of you who are familiar with manuals, the big thing is to look at whether we can fund using the OOS as at a census date point instead of the 1 and the 4. So that won't mean something to most of you, but just so you're aware, that's a big change. It would involve a lot of work, a lot of resources, but we have a great group from the institutions that have been very involved in that. So those are the big updates I had for you today, and I am more than happy to answer any questions before I hand it over to the commissioner. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, if you'll bear with us just a minute, the projector apparently has been changed from the format size, and we're going to see if we can't make a quick technical adjustment. If this was a NASCAR race, I think, this would be where you stopped and got fuel or something. But just, Jeff tells me he can do this in like 12 seconds. A little bit smaller, maybe. Yeah, because it's still off to the, oh, but it's still truncating to the left. Okay, well, that's better. Okay, well, all the resources are online. We sent you the link. If you don't have the link, send me an email after this, and I'll get you the link. But hopefully you can bear with us while we try to figure out why everything's truncating off to the left. But with that said, Dwayne Hiller is next to talk about programs of study.
Said.
And actually, as Julie said during her presentation, the commissioner did come down and join us. I've talked with him, and he's going to talk with us at the end of the day at some point. So just bear with us for a while, and we'll continue keeping on. Y'all are awful quiet thus far, by the way. But anyway, Dwayne.
Okay, we're talking about programs of study, how they originated, and what the current status is so far. A couple of years ago, the Texas Workforce Investment Council and this developed the State of Texas Workforce Plan that included the charge to develop and implement programs of study in community and technical colleges, and to align these with secondary programs of study so that students can seamlessly transfer from high school to a community college, and hopefully from one community college to another if necessary, and still be in the same program of study. The plan was to use national industry certifications where appropriate as an education or training outcome to connect graduate competencies to job skill requirements, just so when students complete the program of study, there'll be a job waiting for them. The main goal of the programs of study project is to ensure that the consistent credit transfer can occur based on programs of study and common technical core curriculum. It's to align career and technical education program content and outcomes with industry certifications wherever appropriate, and to increase access, referral, and outcomes of adult education and literacy programs into these programs of study. The programs of study was written into the Texas Education Code. It's section 618235. It's all here, and it'll be in your printed materials also. The main goal is to incorporate the rigorous college and career readiness standards to support attainment of employability and career readiness skills, to ensure progress and content specificity, and to offer multiple entry and exit points so that students can stop out if they need to and maybe get a certificate and get a job, and then come back in to get the associate degree and then get advancement in their job. And finally, the intent was to result in the attainment of an industry-recognized certification, credential, or license, a registered apprenticeship, or a certificate, associate, or baccalaureate degree. The program of study is defined as a set of academic, career, and technical courses that are organized in a coherent sequence that is designed to provide entry-level knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs, for employment in an occupation. The sequencing improves transfer options and will result in higher graduation and completion rates in geographic and programmatic areas, wherever workers are needed in the current job market. Programs of study will establish degree requirements for the Associate of Applied Science, or AAS degrees, in career and technical education. The programs of studies will basically range from 45 to 60 semester credit hours, and the result will be a statewide articulation agreement that will facilitate horizontal transfer among two-year colleges. Again, a student transferring or moving from one area of the state to another will be able to transfer to that local community college and not lose any credit that they've already taken. The program of study advisory committees were formed based on the 16 career clusters, and their charge is, they're comprised of secondary and post-secondary faculty and administrators, as well as business and industry representatives, to kind of get that continuum from high school to community college and on to the workplace. And the business and industry representatives are a key focus of what the job requires of the students. The advisory committees are organized around the 16 career clusters, and each advisory committee will appoint subcommittees to create the program of study for each specific program. And then they report back to the advisory committee. The advisory committee will recommend those to the coordinating board. So far, we have had 2 program of study advisory committees have been established. And subcommittees from each one have worked to create programs of study for each of those areas. The first area is Architecture and Construction, Program of Study Advisory Committee, and they form subcommittees under Building Construction Technology, which created their program of study, a Design and Documentation Subcommittee, which created 2 programs of study, Architectural Drafting and General Drafting. There was an Electrical, Plumbing, and Pipe Fitting Subcommittee, which created programs of study in Industrial Electrical, Residential and Commercial Electrical, Power Generation Transmission, Installation and Distribution, Plumbing, and Pipe Fitting. And there was a Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Subcommittee that created a program of study for residential, commercial, and industrial HVAC. Majority of these programs are either have been approved or are going to the October board this week. Second, we also have the Health Science Program of Study Advisory Committee, and they have formed subcommittees on rehabilitative services, which includes physical therapy assisting and occupational therapy assistant, one in emergency medical services, a dental hygiene, a radiologic technology, and respiratory care. Again, each of these have submitted programs to the October board, with the exception of respiratory care, who met at the beginning of this month and finalized their program of study. So that will be at the upcoming board meeting. We also have 5 pending health science program of study subcommittees: diagnostic medical sonography, health information management, medical assisting, substance abuse counseling, and surgical technology. We're gearing up to start these committees either next month or in the coming year. As these subcommittees are, as their work is approved by the board, they'll be posted on our website. To find the advisory committees, again, on the website, it's cut off here, but it's under the tab called About Us, and there's a tab called Advisory Committees. And then from that list, you can find the Program of Study Advisory Committees. And each of the ones that are highlighted have active meetings already. So again, this is the website for the Architecture and Construction Program of Study Advisory Committee. And the meeting notes and roster will be on this page. And then Health Sciences Program of Study. Again, this is an ongoing project, and we're still working on getting these subcommittees worked up, and we're also working on getting a new advisory committee written up based on the data to show which programs or which majors show the largest number of students in them. Are there any questions or comments about current work or future work on our programs of study?
I'm sorry. So these committees working on programs of study, is the outcome of their work a standard curriculum? Is it a recommended curriculum? Is it a set of transfer articulation agreements?
In these cases, or most of the cases that we've gotten, it's a recommended curriculum, and it's basically between 21 to, I think one has already gone up to 51 hours of recommended courses. Most of them allow some between 20 and 30 hours of coursework that is available for colleges to kind of determine on their own. But these are generally about 21 to 30 hours of, basically you might call them core courses that are considered important for all students in each program. And so these are just the recommended, I guess, first year of the associate degree. And as we work on refining them, we might get more precise on those, but currently it's about the first year of the degree.
But there is a transfer requirement in the statute, and I'm paraphrasing, but it says something to the fact that if a student is enrolled in a board-approved program of study at one school and they transfer to another school, then they transfer in sequence with those hours. So you don't necessarily have to adopt the program of study, if you will, in the sense of a standardized curriculum, but you do have to make the student whole. And so that the best way to describe it is if a student is 30 semester credit hours in to the program of study, and then they transfer to your institution, the student has 30 hours. Well, what the program of study legislation and the goal is kind of a twofold kind of thing. There are challenges where in some of the larger districts where students are enrolled in this side of town versus that side of town, and over here they want the 3-hour course and over here they want the 4-hour course, and if the student moves across town, well, if they go from the 4 to the 3, they're in good shape from a curriculum point of view, but if they go from where they took the 3-hour course to the 4-hour course, then the students are being told, well, you have to do more courses, you have to do something else. And then there's also some cases where the students are required to take different courses. We use this course versus that course. As Dwayne kind of listed the programs of study, the design and documentation group, and this is them talking, so as I attempt to paraphrase it for you, they looked at the first 3 or 4 courses in WECM under drafting, and the faculty members, and we had about 12 community college faculty members, from y'all's institution, they said these courses are the same. And they had a conversation that lasted probably 2 or 3 hours, and they said, if you take all 3 of these and just kind of add this word and that and change that, it's the same. And that's what they recommended, and that's what they did. And then what we're working with is the WECM committee to get that one course that the faculty agreed was the content that the students needed as the introductory course, and then the other courses will be archived. If you go in and look in WECM, and that's what we're going to start talking about in a minute, is WECM, but in many of our disciplines like drafting and welding and stuff like that, we literally have 100 courses or more. And in the applied associate degrees, as y'all know, we have room for somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 courses, depending on if they're 3-hour courses, 4-hour courses. I'm not suggesting that we need to get all of the rubrics in WECM down to only 12 courses, as an example, but I do think 100 in many of the areas is too much. And that's what we're trying to do with the program of study groups, is create greater alignment around the state. I don't know, Rex has talked about a story when he was at Midland and a student was at Odessa and they wanted to transfer to Midland, and he was in one of the health science disciplines, and it's literally, you can't transfer. There's no way to make it work. And it's just another one of those initiatives of trying to put students first and get them the degree plan they need to get the course of study they need. Nursing programs around the state, they're all get to the same endpoint, the same licensure, the same exam, right? And commonality in nursing programs is probably more chance than anything else. Again, some of the larger districts who have nursing programs on 3 or 4 different campuses, the nursing programs are not the same. And they're serving the same employers. In health science, we're seeing more of consolidation in the industry to where what used to be kind of a regional-based industry is now becoming statewide. And so you see, Baylor, Scott and White, where Scott and White used to be up in Temple and Baylor was more Waco, and now it's grown and doing a very large geographical area. I was at a meeting, I think about a year ago at the Railroad Commission, and there were a bunch of oil and gas people there, and they were like, why can't the programs be the same? And I'm like, well, they can be. And they're like, well, how do you make that happen? I go, well, all you got to do is tell the colleges to do it, and then I'll be glad to come to the meeting and help them do it, and we'll approve it for you. But so it's kind of a conversation about trying to help level the pathway, much as the field of study work is doing as well. So kind of a long answer to a short question of, is it required?
Another.
Dwayne, do you know when we might see a list of what the committees you plan to put together over the next couple of years?
Right, and what's to say from that program study webpage it'll be showing up there. I guess we're currently looking at, like I said, a number of majors, a number of graduates in different programs to find out which is the most, I guess, the most effective area that we would work in next. But I think over the next month or two, we'll be working on developing the next groups of advisory committees.
As we do the committee formation, we send out nominations of members to actually be on the committee. The larger program of study committees are normally about 50% community college faculty, and then secondary, and then business and industry and other experts. So we're trying to get all the voices together to make sure that we have all the constituents in a conversation. We asked them to look not only at the AAS degrees, as Dwayne mentioned, but we also talked about the sequencing of the curriculum as from high school into dual credit and or the programs, and then business and industry, asked them to provide input about what's important. Another thing about the drafting one, I don't know why all my examples are drafting today, but they are. But in the WECM courses, the faculty had always wanted to keep the word blueprint as a legacy of the courses, that this is important. And the business and industry said, we haven't used blueprint in 20 years or more. We don't use that jargon anymore. Nobody does it. And they talked about plan and they're just called the plans now. And so the committee's recommendation was take that word, take the reference to blueprint out of the curriculum. And so it's really and truly trying to get our curriculum more aligned, trying to get some efficiency into WECM. Depending on how you count WECM, there's about 6,000 courses in WECM, and then there's somewhere in the neighborhood, if you look at the iterations, there's probably 18,000 iterations of courses that are taught. This is 2 or 3 years ago. I was looking at a welding course. I don't know why I was looking at welding, but I was. And there was this one course, and it was taught, I think it was a spring semester, about 60 times over the course of the spring semester. And it had, I want to say, 18 different lecture lab combinations that varied from around perhaps 64 contact hours all the way up to like 144 or some number like that. That's not the same learning experience for the students, and we're giving it the same name. And so that's part of why we're working on programs of study, and then some of the stuff we're doing on WECM, that's going to be our next thing. But let's go ahead and finish this. Any other questions about programs of study?
Dwayne, I see the reference to the advisory committee members, but where can we access the actual proposed curriculum?
As I said, most of these curricula are going to the board in this Thursday's meeting. Once they're approved by the board, then they'll be going up on the website.
Okay, so they're not there yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But they were shared. They have been shared. They've been pushed out through public comments and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was just looking on the website.
Yeah.
There's one back.
How do you anticipate this project either complementing or conflicting with the Pathways work that all of us are doing with the Texas Success Center?
Well, obviously, we work closely with TAC, and we try to inform and participate, partner, and that kind of stuff. But I think both the field of study work and the program of study work are at the course level. And pathways, meta majors, all that kind of stuff are important, and we appreciate that conversation. I think what Rex said about, not Rex, John said about initiatives related to the core, I think all of those head us down the same roadway. But quite honestly, as these committees work and they adopt these programs of study, we'll encourage the colleges to adopt the programs of study, but then we've had this long history of, like WECM as an example, to where if there were workshops and WECM courses were changed and or archived, colleges had to adjust their curriculum. And so hopefully all of these things are going into the conversations. I haven't seen anything where they're tackling the alignment of the courses in the AASs. If they are, then I would think, like as an example, if we tackled WECM and they've already, the discipline's already done a lot of alignment work, I think they'd bring that conversation to the committee, and the committee would engage in that conversation. And if they said that's the sequence of courses that's important, and that was their recommendation and their vote and that kind of stuff, I'm not a welder, so I would certainly embrace it and let it go forward.
Any other questions or comments? Glad to be here and would like to keep the path, I guess, the communications channels open. So thanks for your attention, and I guess now we're scheduled for a break.
No. Now we're going to do welcome. Okay. Well, maybe we were scheduled for a break, and I don't know. What do y'all think? I mean, we're 30 minutes ahead right now. Y'all want to break now, or you want to talk about welcome? Break. Okay. Let's go ahead and do 15 minutes, and then we'll come back at 2:30, and we'll start talking about welcome. Okay. The refreshments are free with the exception of the water. No. Help. Make yourself at home. Okay, let's get ready to get started here in just a minute. Give everybody a chance to get back to their seat. During the break, a person asked me, what's my name, and maybe I should have introduced myself, but I just assume that everybody, either knows me or knows of me, which I guess that's a bad assumption. But anyway, my name is Gary Tomerlin, and I'm Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Workforce, and I report to Rex. And just in case somebody doesn't know Rex Peebles, although I do think he said his name, Rex Peebles is Assistant Commissioner, Academic Quality and Workforce. And so y'all probably get a lot of stuff that comes from us or through us or whatever. But anyway, with that said, as just before we took the break, Dwayne was doing programs of study, and I was talking about programs of study. And then we've been doing some work over the last several years related to WECM. And quite honestly, it's a bit challenging to tease the two of them apart a little bit. But that's when we put them back to back in the calendar, in the agenda. And so hopefully we'll go into WECM, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about programs of study and WECM at the same time. Okay, and since I can't really read the last half, I think I know these, but I'm not going to read them to you anyway. But WECM is the technical course inventory for the community colleges. Depending on how you count WECM and all of that kind of stuff, there's varying conversations about the number of courses in WECM. It varies anywhere from about 6,000 to about 18,000. And 6,000 is the actual number of courses. If you count, most courses have either a 2-3 or a 3-4 hour version. And then if you look at the iterations of the allowable contact hour ranges, that gets you the 18,000 number. And so it's a big, huge database of courses. I was talking about this under programs of study. Many rubrics have perhaps 100 courses in them. It really and truly is time for us to have a conversation about doing WECM differently than the way we've done WECM historically. I'm seeing a lot of heads shake yes. It talks about community college increase assistance and ability to respond to employer needs. I think yes, but I think we might have taken that to the nth degree in WECM, to where I think sometimes we go too far of every time an employer says, yeah, but in my factory I do this, and we have a tendency to create a new course. And I think we really need to go back and look at the courses and try to figure out what is the appropriate content and what is the appropriate level for the courses. Now, with that said, nowhere in the process of the programs of study or WECM and the WECM Leadership Committee and that kind of stuff are we trying to thwart or impede or anything else with an employer. If there's an emerging need of employers, we want to have that conversation, and quite honestly, we want to accelerate that conversation. I'm going to tell you about one specific conversation as part of the presentation. This is just the search page of the WECM database. This doesn't affect y'all much, but for about the past year, where did Rex go? I guess Rex left the room. We have been in the process internally of trying to optimize the WECM database. And it has to do with the WECM database, but underneath this search page were many databases. The program submission inventory process, all of that has been changed. We're trying to get that consolidated into one unified database. I think we're just about at the end of that road. Again, most of this is transparent to y'all, but it's internal stuff. But it is important to mention because we're trying to get it all the way back to what's called the technical course inventory table, which is how through the CBM submission process, the edit reports hits off of that table to see if the course is in the inventory for funding. And so all that's just about unified. Hopefully it makes WECM more efficient and more effective. One of the important things that I think is not happening is people searching WACM thoroughly before they go to either special topics courses or local need courses, and we start expanding. And there's some of you heads shaking affirmatively. Maybe y'all should just come do this presentation rather than me. Okay, historically, the WACM course review process was a 4-year cycle, and if Don Perry was here, and we've already used his name in vain at least once, but I would give him Dina Savage and others, Catherine O'Brien from Sanjak, who's retired. They took WECM and got us to the point we are now in WECM. If it wasn't for, and others, many others, should be perhaps named or mentioned as well, but if it wasn't for this legacy work, we couldn't be having these conversations now. And as all this work was planned and began to develop foundationally 2 to 3 years ago, we talked about the legacy of WECM, and then we started talking about WECM 2.0. But historically, the courses were reviewed on 4-year cycles. And so many of you know that every summer there was, well, every spring going into summer, there was nominations of, hey, we need faculty in this discipline, and we need to review these courses. We're going to bring faculty teams to Midland in the middle of July because that's such a pleasant place to go. But we would bring the teams together. They would look at the courses, and they would make suggestions and revisions to the courses. The challenges over time is the courses were fairly mature, and a lot of that got down to wordsmithing. We're just changing this time, and then next time we would change it back again. And so 2 to 3 years ago, we started the process of changing that process. The biggest challenge was that we were locked into a process and a time, and there are examples of, and I forget the baseline year on this, but I think maybe it was in 2012 that computer science was reviewed, and in 2013, Cisco, the corporation, changed the Cisco networking courses, and then computer science wasn't scheduled to be reviewed again until 2016. And so we used local need courses, or we modified the courses, or whatever it is we did for the 3 years or so until we could get back into the queue. That's a process that we need to fix, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're working on. They talk about ad hoc, on-demand workshops were not possible because we did it on the time. You know, if a major computer science, telecommunication company, whatever, happened to do curriculum changes, and it happened to be the summer computer science was reviewed, we could bring all that together. Otherwise, it had to wait for whatever year it was on the calendar. Local needs special topics courses were the vehicle that were designed initially of letting the colleges teach the new curriculum as courses changed before we could get them into the review process. Then what generally happened with the local needs special topics courses is the faculty came together, you know, everybody didn't slice and dice it the same way, right? And so whenever you were given this bucket of learning outcomes to teach, and you had to say, well, I need to break that into 3 courses, and you did 3 3-hour courses, or somebody else broke it into 2 4-hour courses, then we would come to the workshop and say, hey, let's net this down, let's figure out how do we do this. Everybody's already got their program developed, they've got it entrenched, they're teaching it this way, they've got it scheduled. It's hard to change, right? And so what we generally did was we put the 3-hour courses and the 4-hour courses in WECM and let everybody teach what they'd already been doing. Right? We just gave them official course names rather than local need courses. The WECM was funded by Perkins funding to fund the workshops over the years. This slide says $1 million. Dwayne put this together, so I assume he did it correctly. Minor changes in wordsmithing. I remember one summer, and this is before I worked here because I was involved with WECM, there was a team that was brought together at Midland, and they finished their work so quickly that there was actually activities were planned for the faculty who were supposed to be out there working, and because their flights were scheduled the next afternoon. And so, you know, it was time to change. I did, okay. I talked about Cisco as an example in computer science. 2016, we started the process of developing a standing board committee. So prior to 2016, WECM was a field-driven process. There was a Perkins-funded project, leaders from around the state, I named some of them, they did all this process, they guided these workshops, and then they provided the input back to the coordinating board they were putting in the database. The rules just govern, just like all of our committees, and just in case this hasn't been said already, all of our fields of study and program of study committees are governed by rules. We put the rules out there and they say this is what the committee's going to do, how we're going to get nominations and all that kind of stuff, and the WECM Advisory Committee is just another one of those groups. 24 members, community, state, technical colleges, and then we have ex officio members from the various organizations, TACTI, TACE, and TACRO. They're the subject matter experts, so that, you know, if somebody says, well, why don't we rename all the courses and give them new names and new numbers? Hypothetical, made up, can't do it, right? TACRO would weigh in on that big time and say we can't do that, right? And so TACTI and TACE, obviously from their various leadership roles, both the credit side and then the continuing education side, you know, say, hey, if you do that, that affects continuing ed. If you do this, it impacts the credit side. And so the point is hopefully we have the correct voices participating in the process. What we're doing is we're trying to move away from a time-bound, locked sequence of it's 4 years, it's time to look at this. Oh, wow, wouldn't it be neat? Look at all these changes in health science. Well, we can't do that until 2022 because that's the way we do it, right? And I don't really know if we would do health science in 2022 or not. But what we're wanting to do is have triggers that change the process. Programs of study, accreditation, emergency issuing changes, changing technology, skill standards, credentialing, factors that are really and truly driving the curriculum. Now I'm going to stop the presentation and sidebar into a story that started this summer, to where organizations reached out at the state level and said, hey, we're not producing enough graduates in cloud computing. And they held a workshop up in the northeastern United States. Myself and a couple of people from a couple of colleges went up there. We had conversations. Those conversations came back to Texas. Some of their leadership contacted the governor's office. We were invited over to the governor's office, and they said, hey, you know, we've got to find a way to fix this and adapt this and be more responsive and faster. And so, you know, we talked about that we have this in place, we're working to make this happen, and we can be responsive and adaptive. And so as part of that, we started looking, and one of the first things I found is we still have in WECM Windows 2003 server courses. Why did you chuckle, Charles? Because it's 15 years old? And so the next question I asked Dwayne, are we teaching that and reporting it, you know? And the answer is yes. And so, you know, there's kind of a twofold kind of thing here. First of all, we really should and truly should have never named a course with a particular version of an operating system. We should have just let the course be more robust so that as the software changes, the course changes with it, you know. So we shouldn't say, well, you got to install Windows 95 in this course. If you want to install Windows 98, you got to have another course, right? And so we're trying to address that. But then, as part of all this process, the WECM Advisory Committee was scheduled to meet late last month. I think it was the 27th, 28th of the month, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't really remember. But as part of that meeting, we had this conversation with them, and out of the outcome of that meeting is we put out a nomination request for faculty experts in cloud computing. And the meeting is scheduled for November 2nd, so not even 2 weeks from today, a little bit less than 2 weeks away. If you got that, if you saw that, if you haven't nominated, I asked Dwayne a few minutes ago. He said that he thought we had about 12 to 16. You know, we can take a few more, but the point is we're focused and we're targeting. We're not looking at all of computer science. We're looking at networking, telecommunications, client server, that kind of stuff. So, you know, and it's just the only course I can think of right now, and I know it's an ACGM course. We're not looking at BCIS 1305. We're looking at the LAN type courses. And so on November 2nd, we'll have a team here, and we're working with business and industry, and the field is working with us on this as well. And we're going to look at those courses, and we're going to have them hopefully look at the 2003 courses. And by the way, we've also got server 2008 courses. But I mean, that's better because those are only 10 years old. We're going to look at the courses, we're going to have them make recommendations, and then all that will be shared and made available, and then hopefully out of that will come an emphasis on cloud computing, perhaps take some of your client server certificates or whatever you have, add the emphasis to cloud computing and that kind of stuff. And my point is, hopefully it makes us more responsive and more adaptive to business and industry. The plan is to put those in WECM, hopefully by the end of winter, if not winter next spring. Part of this we haven't really finalized yet, but we've got to figure out how to archive the 2003 stuff, assuming those change. I hope those change. I'll even go so far to say I'll be very disappointed if they don't change. But we got to figure out how to archive those because we understand your curriculum and instruction process of you've got to change your catalog in a process. We can't just put this out there tomorrow and you implement it the next day. But hopefully we can put it out there and make it far more responsive so that you can incorporate it as quickly as possible. And so that's one example of how we're trying to do a field-driven process. Over the past 2 years, we've sent a communication to the vice presidents of instruction each year and said, hey, are there any changes in industry, in disciplines? You know, do we need to update courses? If so, what are those? And as an example, we got feedback that the Department of Labor was changing trucking, what it takes to be a commercial truck driver. And about the time we started moving on that, then the current administration said, no, let's repeal those rules, let's put that on hold until we really have time to vet all of this and look at it. And so we're kind of on hold on that, we're monitoring that. But that's what we want to get into, is we want to get into a process to where we're changing courses when we need to change courses. We've got to respond to business and industry quicker, faster. And part of it, I think, is we have a tendency to get down into the weeds in some of our course descriptions to where we create an individual course for everything. I was joking when we were on break about sometimes I think we create courses because at this hospital, when they do the phlebotomy thing, they use the left arm, and in this hospital, they do the right arm. And it's like, no, that's not the same. Well, that's why we call them left and right. I know that. But we've got to start looking at that for students, and we've got to be more efficient. We've got to be more productive. I talked about that we're emailing, we're asking for these changes. You know, I mean, if you want to email me and say, hey, we need to look at this, really try to give me more rationale of other than we just need to look at it. But the WECM comment page is out there, and it's always been out there. That's really and truly the best place to put these comments. If you know something that needs to change, and you know, if you say, hey, we need to look at everything because we haven't changed any courses in 2 years, well, tell us what we need to change and why. That's what we're really and truly looking for. Advisory committee reviews comments to determine type of workshop needed. Do we need to come face to face? The cloud computing thing, I think it impacts the whole state. I think we need to talk about that on the state level, figure out how to incorporate those changes and make those changes move forward. Some programs, we have very, very limited number of programs to where literally those programs need to let us know when they need to change those courses. Mortuary science, funeral sciences, I think we have 2 programs. I think San Antonio and Amarillo. You know, we don't really need to convene a statewide meeting to change that. We need to get those faculty together, have a conversation, and if they need to make changes, let's figure out what the change is. At this meeting last year, Pam England was sitting on the front row from Paris. They have the only horology program. That's watch repair, just in case y'all weren't 100% up to speed on that. But if that's the only college with the courses, why put it in some kind of course review mixed process when the only voice about changing it is that college? And so that's really and truly where we're trying to get to. You know, again, it's very important to keep the courses current, relevant, up to date, you know, meeting the needs of business and industry. But then we've got to get more alignment in the programs. You know, I talked about when I was at the Railroad Commission, oil and gas folks are saying, why are the programs not the same? The cloud computing thing, we're responding to employers who are saying, why are you not doing this? We need to be more responsive, more adaptive. And hopefully I think we've put the process in place to make it happen. And since you all know about this on November 2nd, hopefully you're talking to your computer science faculty and saying, hey, we need to look at this. Are we really and truly doing this at the level we can do this? As we get into workshops, we will make all of this communicated. You know, it's very important that faculty participate. You know, my background's actually computer science. I haven't taught a computer science course since that server 2003 and 2008 stuff. I've been doing this for about 10 years, I guess, and so I'm not qualified to develop those courses or write those courses. So these are faculty-driven processes, but we know the changes that we want to try to make these available so you can do them as quickly as possible, as quickly as they fit into your calendars and your schedules. You know, there'll always have to be a process to where, you know, it's a given. We could bring a group together in July, and if they recommend archiving server 2003 courses at the end of July, you already have your schedule for fall done and everything, so we know that. But so we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate all of that and make it happen, but it's through communication. And quite honestly, if there's other content out there that the content is 15 years old, assuming the content hasn't changed, we need to be talking about it. How do we make it current? How do we make it more relevant and make it up to date, more up to date for students and business and industry? And by the way, you know, just in case this isn't obvious, I would assume that those 2003 server courses are actually using the latest, greatest version of Microsoft that's out there. They're just happening to teach it in the 2003 course that we have out there. But unfortunately, if a student applies for a job and they've got that 2003 course on their transcript and an employer is looking at their transcript, it's like, well, they took this stuff 15 years ago. And you know, as I said, my background is computer science. If a student came to me with a transcript and it had a 2003 course on it, and I'm looking at this is 15-year-old content, I would probably not willingly give credit for it. But then if I happen to talk to the student face to face and it says, oh, I just took this last semester, you know, even if it was if they took 2003 last semester, I probably still wouldn't take it, just simply because it's 15-year-old content, right? You know, it's kind of like Windows 95. I mean, it was great back then, but it's obsolete now. But the point is, we got to keep the curriculum moving. We got to keep it rolling forward, make it more adaptive and responsive. I've already talked about the course review workshop. It's all of the closely related technologies around LAN and WAN, local area networks and wide area networks, virtualization, that kind of stuff. The top name is my name, and the bottom one is Dwayne. Y'all can reach out to us as needed. And I guess collectively, as we do the program of study process and we do the WACOM process, I sometimes talk about that we're trimming the trees from two different directions at the same time. If we could eliminate through a process, and I'm going to make up a number, you know, half of the welding courses in WACOM. I don't know why I'm picking on welding, but there's just literally about 100 courses. If we could get that netted down much closer together, then a program of study becomes much more viable. I gave you the example of the drafting, to where the faculty said, hey, these 3 or 4 courses are the same, but just over the years, we've let them have slightly different names with slightly different descriptions. And the conversation, as I recall, really and truly netted down that the courses had varying emphasis on board drawing and line weight versus going straight to CAD. And the faculty were like, well, yeah, you know, they need to understand that we used to draw this on paper with T-squares and triangles and stuff like that, and now we do that on software with CAD. And the course didn't say anything like you got to spend half the time on paper and half the time on the computer. It doesn't say that. And so you could still teach the learning outcomes of the courses, and each instructor teach it the way they were comfortable teaching it. And so that's examples of program of study in WACM. Hopefully we'll see more courses over time that we update, we keep them current. And if y'all know of anything, like I said, if you know of anything else that has a title that's 15 years obsolete, you know, keyword being obsolete, I mean, I guess a nursing course or something could, an x-ray course as an example, you know, upper body x-rays, I guess that could be a title from 15 years ago and still be current, I don't know. But, you know, kind of seems like it maybe. But if it's like this product from 2003, we need to look at those. And anyway, that's kind of WECM and where we're going with WECM, and a little bit about programs of study and the rationale and whys. And any questions or comments or anything? Okay, so who's next? Oh, Mark. Let me see if Mark, you want to come on up? Mark Poole and Carol Connor from Mark is our Director of Internal Audit and Compliance Monitoring. Well, student success as in GPA in the course, or? We normally just look at frequency, but let me first, you know, or perhaps emphasize that we look at frequency and we look at the number of similar courses, but this is always faculty driven. And I forget which discipline it was, but it was something in the health sciences, and I already told you my background's computer science. And so I will just try to, you know, talk about what the faculty said is there were basically 3 groups of courses to where, like, maybe the first one was pulmonary, and then the second one included pulmonary and something else that's eluding me right now, and then the next one was pulmonary and whatever the other thing is that I'm not thinking of, and testing. And so I'm like, as I was listening to the conversation and them talking about it, I go, if I'm understanding what you're telling me, this is kind of like a Venn diagram to where the first course is 70% and the next set of courses, and all these courses were 1 and 2. And the next set is 85% and the next set is 100%. And they're like, yeah, more or less. And so then the faculty, made whatever their recommendations were, and I don't have those in front of me, and I don't know, but we certainly can give them that data if they ever ask for it. But then any of these things that come out of these committees then are put back to the field, and there's an opportunity for comments. And each individual college, if it's their course, if they're the only one that uses it or whatever, they can provide comments, and those go back to the committees, and the committees then evaluate those comments and make any recommendations or decisions.
The reason why I ask is because I'm curious about number of hours, right? With various classes, different hours, permutations of lecture and lab hours. That's information that I know our advisory boards and our content experts would sure like to know, and I was just curious if it's informing the conversation. And is that something that could be made available if we had a data request?
Well, Rex. Yeah, so if what you're asking about is looking at, say, the 4-hour version of a course versus a 3-hour version of a course, and whether student success rates are greater in the 4-hour versus the 3-hour, then yeah, since we have student level data, we could use the EST and probably look at some of that stuff. We don't currently do that, so I'd have to talk with the data folks to be sure about this, but at first blush, it seems like something that we might be able to take a look at. Gotcha.
And, you know, I mean, as Rex said, just if you think about it, and the course I looked at maybe was an extreme example, but as I said, if it was taught 60 times in 18 different lecture lab combos, and then assuming in those 18 different combos, students made the distribution of grades of A through F and perhaps W's, you're going to have a very large spreadsheet with a whole lot of information. And you know, maybe you could collapse it down to the ABCs and group them all together or something. But I do think we've got to do further analysis in studying and looking at both the 3-hour version and the 4-hour version, but then also the number of contact hours within a course, because there's many Wacom courses that perhaps the low end says that this course has as few as 48 hours lecture only, and then goes up to maybe 144 hours of lecture lab combo. Those are not the same experiences, and you would hope the students that had the 144 demonstrated far greater mastery, and if that's where the course needs to be, that's where the course needs to be, because we're doing the 48 contact hour students in Injustice. But then can you imagine a course that if it really is 48 hours of content and you're being required to stay in the course for 144 hours? So it's a juggling conversation, I think, of trying to figure out where the balance is, and I think that's why it's important that faculty engage in these conversations, which they do. Any other questions? Mark?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Pell. I'm Director of Internal Audit and Compliance here at the Coordinating Board. And thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts with you this afternoon. And in a moment, I'll invite Carol Connor to come up and do the same. She's a member of our team. How many of you, the compliance monitoring is what we're talking about today. So that's the function that that's the term we give it, where we travel to your institution and look at a couple of different areas that we're called to look at by statute. How many of you, by a show of hands, have we visited your institution, our compliance monitoring function? Okay, a couple, 2 or 3. For the rest of you who did not raise your hands, we're much more likely to, you're going to be rising to the top of our list, because part of our selection process is whether or not we've been to your institution. So the longer you go without us having been there, the more likely it will be in the future that you will see us performing one type of review or another. Just like to talk a little bit about the structure of our compliance monitoring function at a high level, our processes, the standards that we follow, and then I'll turn it over to Carol to walk you through the processes that we develop or that we go through to develop our compliance monitoring plan. So our compliance monitoring function right now, we have 4 compliance monitoring specialists. Carol is one of the 4. The compliance function as well as the internal audit function report to me. Pretty standard for state government and really internal auditing, where the director reports to the board and then administratively to the commissioner. So that's our reporting arrangement. Our function was created in the 83rd legislative session. That was on the heels of this agency having gone through the Sunset Advisory Commission review process. And so our enabling legislation really covers 2 areas of emphasis that we're called to look at your institutions. The first one would be funds allocated. So we're looking at financial aid and other academic grants, any funds that the coordinating board is put in a position of trustee or oversight. Those funds then would be subject to our risk assessment, and we would come out and do some compliance work to see how effectively your processes are in complying with the various provisions to administer those funds. The second area really has to do with data integrity. We're looking at the integrity of information that is reported by your institution to the coordinating board, and that's used by various decision makers to do things, chiefly of which one of the big ones is the formula funding information, contact hours that get reported to us, and then ultimately they drive the formula distribution. So in those cases, we're looking at is the information that's reported, does it comply with the reporting guidelines that are put forth by this organization, and does it meet state law as far as the requirements for what gets reported, timeliness, and the accuracy of that information. Our compliance monitoring function follows professional auditing standards, and we try to work with your institutions to provide pretty far in advance notice if you get selected. We actually publish our audit plan that's on our internal audit and compliance website, that's on the agency's main webpage. So you can go out there right now and look for fiscal year 19. You can see our compliance plan and see whether or not your institution made the list for the current year. And it would tell you what type of review your organization is scheduled for. So that list is already out there. Then we go through a process of notifying your chief executive officer, as well as the point of contact person, typically early in the year, just to give you a heads up that we're planning on coming. And then we work during the year to schedule a review or an audit. Never a good time for one of those, but we certainly try to take into account the most difficult times of the year and work around those as best we can. I have a bullet there about the audit reporting process. It really is, it starts while we're conducting the work. We have ongoing status meetings with you and relevant personnel from your institution to let you know, as we're going through the review, what we're seeing, what we're questioning, clarification. Sometimes we're talking to the wrong person, the wrong area, and so it's just a matter of pointing us to the information that we need in order to resolve an issue or a question. Ultimately, that leads to a couple different versions of a report that's in writing that's presented to your institution. So before that report ever gets finalized, you will see some written information regarding whatever the question or the issue is. And then before the report gets final, your institution's management response will come through the chief executive officer to us. We will incorporate that into our audit report, and so the final report then would reflect the issue, our recommendation, and your institution's management response. And then that would serve as a basis for us returning at some point down the road to do some follow-up to see if the issue was addressed. I will ask Carol to come up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Carol Connor, one of the compliance specialists. I am the one of the ones that may call and said, I'm Carol Carner, compliance specialist from the coordinating board, would like to schedule a site visit. Or it could be a desk review, whatever. But I'm one of those ones, but hopefully you welcome the call because we are all a very professional people, really work with you. If it's really, really a bad time, because we give you, you know, like 4 weeks ahead of time to get your schedule. We let you decide what week we're going to be there. But if it's really a bad time, talk to us. Let us know. Say, hey, this is really, really not a good time. Could you schedule another time? And we can work with you. I just want to say that we do work with you, and don't be shy about saying that, because we have several visits, compliance monitoring things to do. So if that comes up, don't feel bad to just say, hey, this is off of time, instead of just calling Mark and said, I don't know why your compliance specialist called us at this time. And I have the project assignments here. So if, you know, again, as Mark said, it's on our website, but if not, if you want to know, I got it right here if you want to know. Okay, let's talk about the compliance monitoring risk process. The risk factors used by compliance monitoring are determined by the Texas Administrative Code Title 19. And the board considers these following factors. So these are the things that we look into to determine where we're going, what compliance risk processes that we're looking at. The first are the amount of the student financial assistance, and that includes grants, loans, the college access loan, scholarship, work study, or grants funds that were allocated to your institution by the board. Whether the institution is required to obtain and submit an independent audit report. And you know about these. This is the comprehensive annual financial reports, which we review. Before we get out there, we review, or we will call and say, would you please send us those? Or the single audit reports. We review those before, so we take those in consideration of those reports. The institution internal controls, we also review those. The length of time since the institution last desk review or site visit. Does anybody know what the desk review is? So we do desk review and site visit. The desk review is where we contact you. We do not physically be at your office at the institution, but we do everything via email and back and forth. It's the same process, but we're not face-to-face. The site visit is face-to-face. We also review the past history or misreported data by the institution. So we really try that you submit your reports, that you submit to the coordinating board as accurate as possible. And this is not talking about in between before they're certified where you made a mistake and you caught it. We're not talking about that. So it's just being sure. So we do review the past history. We work very closely with the Financial Aid Service Department, AQW, because they're the ones, the reports that you submit. So we work closely with the staff in those departments. In regard to data verification, where the data reported to the board by the institution is used for determining funding allegations. And we also consider other factors as considered appropriate by the board. So we annually conduct a compliance audit plan. And we're going to go into more, which is approved. Mark takes it to the board in July, and it's approved by the board, determining which institution that we will be in our compliance monitoring plan. Compliance monitoring risk process, separate institution. We not only do community colleges and technical colleges, we do public institutions, health-related institutions such as Doctors Hospital Renaissance, private institution, Baylor University, SMU, Abilene Christian University, those type of institutions. So all of you are not exempt, sorry, and other institutions. And we do, over the approximately 170 institutions, we do between 25 to 30 projects per year. Last fiscal year, we conducted, and this included site visits, desk reviews, and what we call a follow-up. We did a total of 30. And that's included, that's not just one, that's just not included site visits, that's all of them. So we did approximately 30 per fiscal year. So in July, we started in March. We start doing our risk assessment and compiling all our data and information and complete the annual compliance audit plan. Mark presents that to the Agency Operation Committee, which we call the AOC meeting, which we have this week. Submits that to the board, and the board approves that, and it's around July of each year. So that's where we know around the state fiscal year, when September 1 comes, we start for our next year. So that's the reason why it's right in July, like mid-July. And so that's the reason why we start around, March to be ready for by July. So that's the way it works. And as Mark said, we notify each institution the early fiscal year. We get our contact names from the departments. At least every president is notified. Mark sends an email out to them. But we also notify, if you have an internal auditor, we notify them. We notify if it's formula funding, the registrar, or whoever's the director of financial aid. So whoever that contact person that, like if you submit that report, then you would be as a CC on there. And of course, the chief financial officer. This is our compliance monitoring plan. It's not very clear. Like as Mark said, you can still go on our website. We wanted to kind of highlight the public colleges and technical colleges. But this is our compliance monitoring plan. If you like a copy, I think I brought one with me. If not, there's, like I said, it's on our website. And it's very detailed. We have to even calculate the number of hours per auditor have to use per school. So it's very detailed, and it takes some time, and we really take it seriously in completing this. Now, sometimes we have to do a revision, but we'll let you know. For example, in August of 2017, we had to do with Hurricane Harvey. Well, because of Hurricane Harvey, we had to, we contacted the institution and said because of Hurricane Harvey, a lot of them were in the areas that were affected in Houston and the surrounding areas, we canceled those institutions. We did not go out and visit those institutions, or we delayed it. Some of them said, no, don't come right now. We canceled it, but then some said, you could still come, but come later. So they said, wait until the end, like December. We had some in December. So we do consider if there is some kind of issue going on, a disaster or something, so emergency, we do consider those and revise our plan and have to have it amended by the board. Are there any questions? I went through that kind of fast, but if you have any questions, I'm willing to Mark and I are willing right here to ask. Again, if you think of something later, you may contact Mark and I, and that's our information up there. You're welcome to contact me at any time to follow up, or if you're even on the list, you can come back and you can ask. No problem. We also do all forms of, like I said, site visits. If there were, we also do a follow-up visit. For example, if there were a previous year we did a site visit or a desk review and there were findings, what we would do is what we call a follow-up. And a follow-up usually happens if the following year, and we're just trying to make sure that those corrective actions were implemented. And then we only focus on that piece. We don't do a whole nother audit all over again. We don't do that. We just focus on that piece that if there were findings, that's the area that we'll follow up on. And that's why we call it a follow-up. Are there any questions? Okay. No one's scared. I'm glad. We don't bite. Okay, if you don't have any questions, this ends it. Again, thank you for your time. We appreciate you inviting us to join. Again, you have our contact information. If you have any questions, you're willing to, sometimes you think of something later, you're welcome to email me. Mark, anything else?
Thank
Okay.
you. Appreciate it.
So are we just doing better today, or are we not giving y'all the information you need, or it's just working? Well, what? Oh, well, I mean, yes, this meeting is about y'all telling us and providing input and insight and communication, and us trying to get the answers for you. So if you have questions, yes, as you can see from how many staff are either down here now or have been down here and that are presenting, it's information, and we're hopefully giving you the correct and current information that you need that's relevant. So if you want to push back, yes, push, and I'll get Rex up here as soon as you start pushing. Okay. So we're going to talk about nursing in just a minute, but I want to operationally ask a question. I mean, obviously, as y'all can look at the clock and the agenda, we're 40 minutes ahead. Y'all just want to push through and finish, or do you want to plan another break maybe after this session? Any thoughts? Or I'll put that as a question now, and after this session, we'll do a show of hands or something. And we can either adjourn early or we can take a little break. But Fuan, you're going first, right? This is about funding, nursing funding opportunities. And just so you know, Ed Buchanan called in sick today. I'm sure it had nothing to do with y'all. But Tom Keaton is going to substitute for him. And so they'll just do 1 and 2, and then we'll come back and talk. Okay?
I only bring good news. Nobody's getting investigated or audited. I'm Fu Anning. I'm a program director in academic quality and workforce. Gary has asked a couple of us to talk about funding opportunities available for nursing education, specifically initial RN licensure education programs. So this agenda is a joint presentation. I will first talk about the Nursing Innovation Grant Program, if you can read it. It's abbreviated as NIGP. And my NACI colleague from Strategic Planning and Funding, Tom Keaton, will talk about the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program. Well, you can see, NIGP grants are made through a permanent fund established by the 76 Texas legislature in 1996, and it was a result of the state's tobacco settlement, lawsuit settlement. And so until August 31st, 2019, you can kind of see the day on there. Through an amendment in 2015 by the 84th legislature, the enabling statute has directed the coordinating board to focus on nursing education exclusively, and also to just use the nursing funding to support programs that prepare students and faculty, qualified faculty members in the initial RN licensure programs. And so under the nursing exclusive focus for the program, eligible applicant institutions are 4-year general academic institutions, independent health-related institutions, and also, of course, 2-year institutions are eligible to apply for grant funding. The program is competitive. All the received grant applications are reviewed based on criteria that we publish in the release request for applications, which we abbreviated as RFA. You'll hear RFA a lot whenever we talk about grant programs. And so our recent grant competitions have focused on expanding simulation and skills lab capacities as a way to facilitate just increased use of high fidelity simulation, given the challenges in programs securing hands-on patient care, clinical situations for the students. And so currently we have, you can really see, we have 27 active simulation grants, and the grant program has about $3 million available for future grant awards. And as I have mentioned, we have focused recently on simulation, supporting the increased use of simulation in nursing education. The grant awards have been made under the Building Simulation and Skills Lab Capacity Initiative. Those simulation grants have a 24-month grant period, and the maximum award amount is $200,000 per grant. Our primary budget categories support the shift from the patient care situations into increased use of simulation in nursing education. And I think the slides are available on the website for everybody, right? Okay, great. For the simulation grants, we typically get a lot of interest from two-year institutions. And you can see that this is for the 2017-18 grant cycle, which will conclude in December this year. Out of the 34 applications we received, which are represented by the red bars, 24 came from two-year institutions. And out of the 17 grant awards made, 12, or about 70%, were awarded to two-year institutions. And again, the NIGP awards were made based on a standardized review process. For the 2018-2019 grant cycle, which started in January this year, it's a similar pattern. You will see that we have a lot of interest from two-year institutions, and we also make a lot of the largest number of awards to two-year institutions. So now with funding available in the grant program, we will be working on a new request for applications fairly soon. And if the statutory language is not amended again after August 31st, 2019, the focus of the grant program will revert back to nursing, allied health, and other health-related programs. And so the new IFA, we are thinking, will probably have a focus on interprofessional experiences for our students, which has been talked about much in health professions education. The goal is to expose students to a team approach to providing care to patients involving different disciplines and professions. It's been just talked about a lot in the health professions, and that might be a way of us addressing just a possible change of the focus in the grant program. And as we work on the RFA, we will be collecting input from different stakeholders and groups. So please tell your faculty members, your deans, directors to email their suggestions for the program to the NIGP email address that you can see on the screen. Tentatively, the new RFA will probably be released after the upcoming legislative session has concluded. So most likely late spring or summer 2019. That way we can have more clarity in terms of applicant eligibility for the grant program. And if you are interested in receiving, or your faculty receiving grant-related information, you can find e-updates on our THCB website. It's at the bottom of the page. You will see an icon that looks like a letter or an email. But if you can find it, go ahead and shoot me an email. It's a little hard to find, or email me, and I'll get you the link. Questions? All right, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Fuan. As Gary told you, my name's Tom Keaton. I'm the Director of Funding and Resource Planning here at the Coordinating Board. The good news is this is not a testable subject, so there won't be an exam after. Unfortunately, Ed Buchanan, our Program Director, who's the Direct Administrator of this program, took ill and is unable to be here. However, I think we'll be okay as we go forward. And if I can figure out how to use this, there we go. Okay, the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program. It has two main purposes. First is to increase the number of graduates and to increase enrollments. Those are the two main things it wants to do, and the different programs that we go over target those two overriding goals. Programs open to all professional nursing programs, whether it's state institutions, private, not-for-profit, and community colleges as well. There's three separate programs, and first I have to point out that it's $3.3 million to the regular program. It's a total of $10 million appropriated through rider, and the exact amounts are specified in the rider. And we'll go over each of the regular, the over 70, and the under 70 as we go forward in the presentation. Okay, first the regular program. All institutions that meets criteria, that have a nursing program, are eligible to participate. Start in 2006. All of these programs you must apply for. And the awards are annually allocated. It's based on the historic increase in nursing graduates as submitted on the CBM 009. We'll get into some of the aspects of the reporting and the need for timeliness. The typical award is $3,000, $3,500. Now, if you look at the legislative rider, it'll give an amount, I think, $10,000. But it also has a provision that if funds aren't available for all to get that $10,000, we then proportionalize it out into a pro rata allocation based on the available data. The award must supplement the current funding. So there is a maintenance of effort aspect to it that's covered in the application process. The over 70 standing for the fact that you have a current graduation rate of over 70%. It was added in 2010, and of course it's for a 2-year period. Each year's award is separately. It's not a biennial award. And you know, based on increased enrollment targets. Now, this is a key factor between the over 70 and under 70. The legislature sets a percentage increase for the over 70, 12%, 18% for years, respectively, or that's what they have set for each year of the biennium. When we get to under 70, the institutions set that target. Now, the big one, institutions must repay any unearned funds. So again, you get the money. If you fail to meet the target, you have to repay it. Another aspect is if you don't expend the funds, you have to repay it. Now, you may ask, why would anybody not spend the money? And when we ask that, well, there's some good reasons. One, if the institution's not confident that they're going to meet that target out there and they get that money, it's a lot harder to go out and spend it and then find it on the back end. So institutions have a tendency to hold on to it. The typical, again, base award is $10,000 per licensure, and we use the data from the nursing board, our Center for Nursing Workforce Studies, to determine the change in the rate. The under 70 program, it too was added in 2010, under 70%. Application is for a 2-year period, very similar. Award is for a 1-year period. It comes through what's reported on the CBM 009 in terms of increased graduates. Now, again, the institutions set this target. So it does need to be a thoughtful process of what you really think you can get. Nobody wants to leave money on the table, obviously, but again, we have to go through the rather distasteful process of recouping the funds. It's never comfortable, but to the credit of the institutions, they know when it's happening, and it's not a very emotional event. And you can see on the slide what the typical base awards are. So that's kind of the overview. Really where the nuts and bolts is are making it work. One factor that we kind of, because of the volume of work that it takes, both through the application process and the annual reporting process, which we do report annual year expenditures, and as Mark touched on, what those things were expended for. So having one point of contact makes it administratively manageable. It's very, very difficult if you just had 2 or 3 people from the institution. Of course, that triples the amount of work. To expend these funds, you have almost 5 fiscal years to expend them. So if you don't do it in year 1, we're not going to run in and start scraping them on year 1. It takes some time for us to do that. The use of award expenditures is restricted towards cost associated with that nursing program. I'm pretty sure, I'd have to defer to Mark, but that they do look to make sure those kind of funds are expended within those fields. And there are line items in there, and I'm not going to go into all of them in the annual report of what they can be spent on. But equipment, you can spend on salaries, you can spend on a lot of things. Again, with the understanding and in the understandable apprehension that if you don't make that target, you may have to pay it back. So people have a tendency to want to leave that in the bank. And of course, you have to document all those factors in case it's audited, and they are required if the award is over $500,000. As I said before, one of the things that we have to look at is timeliness. So that we do have an application deadline, and we have to hold to it fast. Because we do have a fiscal year, we've got legislative appropriation cycle and everything else, so we have to hold fast to that. The other part is the CBM 009. Now, we understand that reporting is challenging. There's a lot of reports, and especially this time of year, the reporting folks and REDC are going full throttle to get all this stuff in. But understand, we have to have these data in order to administer the program in a timely fashion. Okay? The next thing, and we'll talk about, is RPA codes, which essentially allows us to look at the course and look at the data and say it is directly related to. CIP is not sufficient. And you really should address this, and whoever's administering your nursing shortage reduction, look at those data before they come out of the institution. Because once they're sent to us and certified, we're going to act on them, and if something in there isn't quite kosher. So it is very much an operational matrix situation at the institutions to be able to make that work well. Because a lot of times people operate in silos. And so if they're taking data and throwing it out, and then they look and go, no, that's not right, then we have a real quandary of trying to go back, and we said recoup, but not recoup, and we redistribute those funds. We don't hold on to them. We don't send them back to the legislature. We redistribute them to the institution. So again, that is important. So when we look at the RPA codes, and I'm not going to get too much in detail at 3:35 in the afternoon, and we'll be glad we'll take any calls and things you have to answer these questions. But they are in place to determine nursing graduation rates and to really focus that down. And they're critical to both the over and under, but especially the under 70, where it's your targets that you've submitted to make sure you get credit for the data that and the work that you've done. That, my friends, is a very quick overview of it. That's Ed Buchanan's stuff. I believe you have copies of the slides. Again, timeliness, completeness of the data, and we know that there's a transaction cost and an administrative burden in doing it, but to the largest extent, that is directed by the rider and the enabling legislation in Chapter 61 of the Texas Education Code. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to run before anybody thinks one. Oh, darn it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sissy Matthews from Galveston College. And if I could provide some friendly feedback, and it is friendly, but the communications that come out on these grants are a little confusing. And I'm hesitant to say that because of the color coding. I think there's a real effort to try to make them clear, like this does pertain to you, it may not pertain to you, this is just an FYI email. But you really have to get through that email and like, what am I supposed to do? Is this just informational? Is this sent to everybody? Or I got this email because I'm delinquent on something. So I don't know what the solution is, but if you could just provide that feedback that sometimes the emails are really confusing as to whether or not that pertains to my school or it's just an FYI.
Okay, so if we called out and I don't mean calling out, that's probably not the best word, but if we called out on that saying this pertains to or something to ensure that it vectored it in?
I don't want to be prescriptive in that. I'm sure they can find a way. And like I said, the emails, they look like they've put a lot of effort into them to try to make them very clear because they're very color-coded. But just to provide that feedback, I don't know what the solution is. I'm sure they can find something. But sometimes for the schools, it's, especially when you get one, you get like 4 of them in a row, depending on what you have, and you're like, okay, which one of these am I supposed to respond to, or which one of these is just sort of a statewide announcement?
No, and we appreciate the feedback, and we're always looking to make it better and make it easier. I mean, makes it easier on you. We get less phone calls. Yeah. Makes it easier on us. It's a win-win times whatever. How many institutions do we have? A couple hundred. Any other questions? Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so before we started that, I put out the question about should we break or should we not break? That's
mine.
Water is a commodity. You know, we're really just about 3 days away from the start of the zombie apocalypse, y'all. I don't know if you really you need to see the pictures of where I went looking for water this morning and people hoarding water. But anyway, The question about break or no break, Jarrell Booker is actually not going to be here for about another 10 minutes. So why don't we just let that be our answer, that we'll take about a 10-minute break. And then when he gets here, we'll convene the last session. And it looks like we'll probably still adjourn 30 minutes early for today. But so y'all can go on your own quest to find water whenever you leave here. But anyway, let's take about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll call back together when Jarrell gets here. Hey, y'all go ahead and continue to enjoy your break for a minute. As you can see, we tried to fix it, and Murphy's Law, you know what? Maybe we'll test your dexterity. You know, my first question is, why would the projector even really have a setting that would let you pick, put the picture upside down? I mean, that seems to be the $64,000 question, but obviously it does. But with that said, Jarrell Booker, Assistant Commissioner of College Readiness and Success, is going to talk about 2 or 3 initiatives within his division. And hopefully you have the PowerPoint, and if not, those monitors in the back, I think will perhaps have it up and running. Many of you have your laptops and that kind of stuff, but just, bear with us for this last session. I think Jeff's going to try to keep pushing buttons, and maybe it will pop back up halfway. Maybe when you get halfway, But anyway, with that, Jarrell's going to finish this out, or at least the last session for the day, and then we'll do closing questions and comments. Jarrell.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. I think it's interesting. Mine is upside down. I'm not sure what that's saying about me and my division, but people did a great job on the PowerPoint, so I'm still going to click through it like it's there, but I think you have it. And is it on those screens? All right, so I need everyone to scoot back 3 rows. All right, let me go through this real quick. I'm Jarrell Booker. I run the College Access and Success Division. Kind of our goal is getting you to and through. That's what kind of we're built. We get grant funds, if you didn't know. We get funds from the state. Sometimes we get federal funds. Sometimes we get outside source funds to help you all and 4-year students get to and through, right? Now, in that, one thing we're really looked at is about being college ready. We have developmental ed in our division, which you'll hear more about tomorrow, and we see far too many students who are dev ed, so we work very closely with K-12 to kind of make sure we reduce that population so we can have actually more actually completing, all right? So first slide, if you lean sideways, is what does it mean to be college ready, upside and the correct way. First thing we have is Generation Texas, which, how many of y'all heard of Generation Texas? I assume, okay, great. It's actually getting some traction through the years. We're just trying to build a college-going culture there at K-12. Obviously, you all have partners. There's events all over the state around Gentex. Previously, we just felt really good about saying there's Gentex, and are you doing something? Now we're actually tracking and see how many districts are doing it, how many students we think are actually doing or completing their applications and their FAFSA applications. We're tracking whether not only their events, but are more students going to college or applying from certain school districts, and then trying to encourage them to actually have some sort of Gentex event. Recently, have anybody heard of the Reach Higher campaign? Anybody? No? It's a big one? All right, great. Well, next year will be 2. So what we have in the Reach Higher is trying to really track, it was previously the First Lady's initiative about trying to have more people fill out applications and complete FAFSAs. Now, the new First Lady is not really focusing on that, but that initiative caught fire in the country, so we're still doing it, with a nonprofit actually taking the lead. Most recently, Region 5 and Region 8 received monetary awards for doing very well. Region 5 had the biggest growth in applications, and Region 8 had the biggest growth in FAFSA. So for people in Region 5, Region 8, anybody? Yeah, they need to say something?
Yeah, I need to say something.
You can stand up, say something. That was great.
Yeah, Region 5. Melissa Armitar. I'm Melissa Armitar with Lamar Institute of Technology, and the reason Region 5 is up is because all the schools in Region 5 had the opportunity to have a college day with Lamar Institute of Technology, where we used their computer labs and sent our people out. Every student filled out a FAFSA and a college application, and they could apply to any college, not just to LIT.
Well, thank you. It worked. There you go. Good job, man. That's Claudette's initiative, so good job, Claudette. If no one stood up, she was going to lose her job today. But that was great. I'm glad y'all did that. And we want to grow it. As long as that we make it a competition, it's a friendly competition, and, you know, as things go well, everybody did well this year. So we're happy for those 2 regions, and thank y'all for participating in that. Also, no matter what direction, financial literacy is always important. We want to make sure students understand the value of education. I think higher ed's been under attack for a little while about the value of it, and I know your institutions are a high value, and can't say that for all institutions in the state, but we do think that everyone understands that it is important to have a credential of value. When we think financial literacy, a lot of people think checking accounts, savings, and so forth. We're actually are comfortable with that being part of the message, but we're really looking at reducing debt, college debt. Are you really taking the right amount of loans? Are you taking too many classes? Are you really focusing on whether, you know, if you want to be a school teacher, it's great to go to Baylor, but you might not make that money back if you're taking out a lot of loans. So just being thoughtful on how we go about doing that. Also with the emergency aid network, how to use financial aid for more completion than necessarily getting in for access. Those are things we're really going to focus on. Do any of you all have financial aid programs? Any sort of financial literacy programs? Anybody? Anyone that you feel so strong about it that maybe we should come out and see it? Don't all at once. Look at everybody. Now I do. If you. You don't have to see it, but we do aid by paycheck. Aid by paycheck.
Our overall I'm sorry, I'm Rebecca Goosen from St. Jack. We do aid by a paycheck, which they get financial aid every 2 weeks, like a paycheck,
right,
instead of in one lump sum, and we've reduced the amount of financial aid that's in debt that students have because of that.
Oh, good. Okay. Did you?
We have a Title III grant focusing on financial literacy, and we do text messaging to students to remind them of certain deadlines and opportunities. We host webinars and have quite a few videos available for students to negotiate that whole financial aid process.
Okay. All right. If you do, Erin Willick here, she's going to raise her hand. So if you think it's a very good program, we want to hear about it because we want to expand it in the state if there's other schools could use it or hear more about it. It's something it's important for us for our 60 by 30 plan, and we just want to make sure we're hearing about all the different programs in the state because a few of them get more attention than others, but we know there's a lot of good ones, so we want to know. So what we're doing now, outside of asking you all, is, you know, making sure there's so many apps and web pages and things out there that we're actually combing through to find out if any of them are really useful for the state. We're also, with Monique, who's not here, kind of growing and replicating our EA network. Any of y'all part of the EA network at all? Emergency? Okay. So making sure we're partnering within the owner agency to make sure, yeah. And it's still kind of wide, but thank you. I'll take what I can get. So that's kind of where we are with financial literacy, and that's going to grow over the next year or two. UDI mentors. So we have work UDI mentors to fund college access and success programs. We've recently changed the way we've done work study. We've tried to match the way our financial aid division does. Previously, it was separate and caused some confusion, or we weren't getting the data we wanted. So we're hoping to grow our work study program, not just for work at the local high schools, but also work on your own campus around completion. You did know you can use your work study mentorships to improve your own completion numbers. Wonderful. So we're hoping that is growing, and we're hoping to get data to help say, hey, we need more work study because it helps our institutions actually improve on their completion. As you may know, if you don't know, the allocations are based off of, you know, the larger pot and where you kind of fit on that larger pot, particularly around FADs. It's been a work in progress for my division. I have a great new staff who's actually focused on matching what they're doing with financial aid and trying not to double up on the work. So hopefully we'll get that straight through this year. As you all know, everyone likes change as long as it's the same as it was before. So we're going to continue to work on that over this year. As I started off talking about student ready, this is something very critical to me around college and student ready. what we want to do is we're trying to change mindsets. If you haven't heard me speak on this, we're trying to make sure not only do students and families understand they need to be college ready, that something I've said for a few years is college is hard. I think a lot of times, and I'm not blaming you all, but we go out and promote college and we make it seem almost easy, right? Just come on, you can do it, just come. And then they get there and they're like, oh my goodness, it is hard. And what we want to just make sure they know that early on so they're actually prepared for it and they're taking the classes they need to take and they're not undermining themselves so that when they show up to your institution, they're behind. So that sort of piece is something important to us at CRS, but then there's another side of it. If they do what they're supposed to do to be ready and they show up, the job of the institutions to be student ready, okay? So what I do periodically is I call all your institutions periodically. I'll call at 4:30, I'll call at 8:30, I'll act like a student, and I want to see what's going to happen. Do y'all ever do that for your own institutions? I'm curious if you do, right? Great, because you learn so much about, when we do it for our own coordinating board, we learn so much about our own work when we do it that way, when we put ourselves in the student's shoes. We used to get student complaints, and I would hear complaints, and I would say, that's impossible. School would not do that. And you find out a school would do that. So what we try to do is reach out, figure out what's happening, not complain, feed it back to you all and say, hey, this is what's actually happening. Please go back and check this. We're not telling on anybody. We just know this is a barrier even for us if we're trying to do certain things. And with that, there will be some sort of technical assistance and some sort of sticker that goes on your website or wherever you want to put it that says you are a student-ready college. If you're not, we'll work very closely with you, whether we get experts around the state or country to come in to kind of say, hey, what can we do to help improve this sort of piece in your institution that wasn't necessarily student-ready? Yes?
So you're saying you're doing that now? You're doing that now. You're making the phone calls. I get that. But you're saying you're going to come up with some type of certification. And are there any schools that have already been certified? Or
no
when's
schools.
that going to happen?
And so no schools have been certified yet. And the calls that I'm making aren't part of that certification process.
Oh, okay.
It's for me to, you think you're smart until someone tells you you're not. So it's for me to keep making sure this is what we think is actually happening. So when we go back and figure out, we're going to tell you in advance, this is what we're looking for in the student ready, so you actually can know, and then we'll go down that path.
Yeah, it sounds great. Okay, thank you.
No, it's no surprise, no pop quiz on this. So with that, we just want to make sure institutions are being thoughtful about where they are and making sure students are being thoughtful where they are, and our parents. I mean, I deal with parents right now. We deal a lot with K-12, and most of you all dealing with it for dual credit. They will tell the students, this absolutely transfers. And I raise, absolutely transfers? Well, yes. Does it transfer from my major? Well, yes. I'm like, are you sure? Because you didn't seem sure. And then you start to go, will it transfer anywhere? And some of them say yes. They don't know, right? And that's from us not actually having that sort of conversation, because we know, or I think we know, and they don't. So that sort of process of K-12, understanding what you do, how it works for us, and to the extent we can make it easier, which I know that's Rex's joy, we will continue to do that. But as this campaign rolls out, we will let everyone know. We will call. There will be data involved. We will send something out. We will have possibly student surveys if you want to participate to be a part of that, okay? It will not be a surprise. Everyone know. And I may come back to this group and share that with you when it actually takes place, okay? Another initiative for us that is well, let me skip that because I already talked about that. And one part I do want to point out is we will have a series of videos, really short videos, mostly on social media, that kind of trigger that sort of thought for students and for you all. It's written for students or directed and published for students, as well as administrators. So you may see this, and when you see it, you'll say, I think that's what Booker was talking about, because it's really making you say, is that what we do? For example, you go to your website. If I want to transfer to your school, is it super easy to find it? You assume it is, but how is it? Are you speaking their language? Is it if you call it, is there a number attached to it? If they call a number, or who's going to answer? Is that person going to know the answer? Those are the sort of things we happen. I'll give you an example. We were in our office. We called UT. Is anybody from ACC here? Then I won't put you on the spot. Some other school in Austin, and UT. Okay? And in that call, I wanted to see, in one of our schools, I'll bring up WGU. And I wanted to know at 4:35, 4:45, who would answer the phone and be able to tell me, because I'm ready now to go to college there. And who would answer and who would take. Now, 3 of the schools, I got nobody. Got a computer. Computer was very kind, but I got no one. Okay? And I wasn't able to click out of it. I just couldn't go through that maze, and we all know how that is. WGU, although I don't think the person really knew what I was saying, they were able to actually give me somebody, and that person was all in right then and there to get me to go to their school right then and there at 4 something to get that. Now, I know that's what they're built for, that's what they do, but I think our public institutions can actually do that also, and that's the sort of thing I just want to be mindful of when we do these sort of things. So the videos will sort of trigger that sort of thinking and hopefully give you support in your own institutions if you want to do things or think these are ways you should actually go. All right? I guess I could have shown the hacky sack video, but we'll save that one. Y'all remember no? Yes? Okay. I have staff who've never seen a hacky sack. So the next slide is something that's really important to us on the 60 by 30 plan, is addressing stop outs. All right, is this number surprising? Not for this group, it's kind of par for the course. All right, but what we are learning is how many students already have 60 and 90 hours, or for 4-year have 130 and 40 hours and no degree. We didn't even know somebody who has 300 hours and no degree. Okay. Now, we actually go back and say, you just take them or these completed. But these are the sort of students we want to get back as these numbers is growing and growing and growing. Okay. So we have a program called Grad Texas, which has been around for a little bit and just kind of sitting, it's kind of hovering. And now we've gotten staff and financial resources to put behind that. So we're going to start a consortium of schools, maybe 5 to 10 schools, to help kind of be experts on this in the first year or two to get students coming back. And then if everybody else wants to join and get on that, we will. It'll help on graduation bonus if that ever actually starts to grow. But we will also support these schools in marketing. We will support these schools in outreach to kind of get people to come back and finish. All right, so if you think you're really good at getting returners, not just your returners, other people's students coming back, to the extent we can do it with SACs for 4-year colleges, let me know. I'd love to hear about it, because we're going to have to figure out what schools are really good at this, have majors for it, online, some sort of multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary to make it easier for people to return. And we will find those 5 to 10 schools, at least start off in that sort of consortium. Another piece we have, that next steps, something I'm really excited about. You all know about K-12 and counselors, 400 to 1. For K-12 counselors. Do y'all know what your counselor-to-student ratios are? What about do you have for your advisors? 1 to 900? What else? 1 to 500. So not bad. It's very personal. A lot more than the 1 to 900. So what we want to do is we're trying to help on 2 fronts. One, we're trying to help on the K-12. And then we will also, at the same time, help with you all. We're trying to have live advisors. So anybody familiar with Advise Texas? Okay. These are near-peer advisors in certain schools who have challenges of people going to college, and we're trying to get former Advise Texas advisors, people who are trying to get their counselor's degrees, to be online to respond to students when they ask a question about advising, okay? We're not sending them to any particular school. That's not our goal to do that. But if they call and say, hey, I'm thinking about ACC, we'll have the advisor say, well, here's the admissions number, or here's our, contact person, you should call them. Okay, but what's beautiful about it is it will have artificial intelligence a part of it. So we can actually not only deal with the 10 to 15 people actually taking the call, the chatbot can deal with thousands of people at one time from the understandings that come out of the actual live people who are doing that. Okay, so as we grow that, if you're 27 and 28 and want to go back to college, who do you call? Right? You can only call you all, and if you don't answer, you're pretty much done at that point, or you get on a website. So we're trying to have someone they can actually text, respond, and then send them back out to you all, because you're the experts for your own institutions and what you happen. So that sort of virtual advising system is going to be rolled out slowly sometime next year. Okay, we can act like it's going to be rolled out this year, but I'm too afraid to do that fast till it's working just the way I need it to work. So it'll probably happen next year. All right, and what we want to do is what I'm hoping you understand around this is it's not just the information we're giving. That's the greatest thing. Any idea what was really best part of this? Is information we get. We will get information. If they use your school and these are problems that we're continually seeing, we'll give it to you, right? We'll tell you, hey, we've gotten 400 calls that this was down or this wasn't working or it was confusing, and let you handle that. So the data we get and how do we respond and reach out to students and communicate is one of the biggest tools. We can say, hey, FAFSAs are due. Applications are opening up. Hey, you mentioned you wanted to go to San Jac. Did you know that's available now? So the computer will naturally do those sort of things over time. All right, I think we'll have, Aaron, what's the sort of understandings that they have at some of these institutions already? A couple 100,000? So the AI system will learn and have a couple 100,000 understandings to be able to grow that, and the state size of Texas will be able to do a lot better than other places. Any of you all use artificial intelligence now, chatbots? You do? Okay. No one else? San Antonio, only one? That's it? In there? Okay. All right, well, we're excited. We'll let you know when that happens too. We'll probably reach out to you all and find out if there's a contact you prefer to have so the system can actually send that out. That way you know you're getting a response the way you want. All right. Any questions about CRS? I know it's late. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it. No, I answered everything. Oh, got one. Sorry. You set me up. What can I do for you?
I was interested to hear that you're calling schools to sort of check on what kind of responses you get. Earlier this year, we were looking into hiring a vendor to do some secret shopping for us. And we realized that the vendors don't provide scripts, that the school itself has to create the script. We have to say, okay, here's a script for financial aid, here's a script for admissions, here's a script for testing and counseling. And you have to define the questions, you have to define the possible responses, you have to identify which response is the good response that you're looking for, right, so that they can train their shoppers to, with this scorecard that they can go through and do. That's a lot of work. I'm wondering if you're going to do that work for us.
So it's interesting. One, I think it's funny if you do that work and you're paying them. For us, we started very simple. Basic things we know because we deal with K-12 that they're asking. So because of our Texas advisors, we have information from high school students all the time. So I call and no one answered. That's the first one. So that's an easy one for us. If you answer, congratulations, that was great. The second also is dealing with transfer. So we're not going to do that work for you, but what we will do for us is we're not going to keep doing that. That's not going to be part of our student ready sort of campaign. Right? It'll be surveys, it'll be data, we will see how well you do with retention and persistence. Those will all go into that. We do that to make sure when we're doing our videos and we're talking to high school students, we're speaking intelligently about what they're actually experiencing. For example, the videos we recently did, we've done focus groups on the videos. Okay, we had high school students look at it, 2-year college students look at it, 4-year college, and what we thought they would like or made sense didn't. So we had to go back and say, we were wrong, and that allows us to keep checking and checking and checking. So the short answer is we will not do that, but what we will do is we will continue to do that to drive how we inform through Gentex, through Advise Texas, and our system itself. And for example, if we have a chatbot responding and they're sending somebody to a number that doesn't work or no one's answering, that's not going to work for us. So we're going to continue to do that to make sure we're giving timely, accurate information as much as possible. I like the idea of the secret shopper, though. That's a great idea.
We liked it till we found out just how much work we were, and it does seem like a script would be applicable to many schools. It doesn't feel like every script has to be customized to each and every college, so it does seem like the sort of thing that could be done for our sector.
You know what? I like that idea, though. You are getting me to think about how we could be helpful for all of you all if we helped on something like that. I mean, everybody might not want it, but it could be a helpful tool.
I mean, everybody doesn't have to use it, but it would be nice to have sort of standard scripts and standard responses that you would say, these are the responses that students find helpful, and if those are the types of responses you're giving, you get our student-ready certification.
Okay. I like that idea. We'll consider. Look like they got them talking, so we'll do something. That's a great idea.
Oh, look at those heads nodding.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vanna?
We implemented Dallas County Promise last year, and as a result of that, Dallas County Community College District last Friday had a meeting of all of our student support personnel to get agreement on the essential steps of application to enrollment so we could have a consistent approach. It was a very interesting discussion, and it just was built upon the idea that we're redesigning the experience of our students based upon the input from the first cohort of Dallas County Promise. So we'll let you know.
Appreciate that. That's helpful.
This isn't really a question, but the Virtual College of Texas, we've been talking, we host it for the state, and we've talked a lot with TACC about how.
No, we can hear you. You're good.
Yeah. And anyway, one of the ways in which we think it might be useful to repurpose students who have a certain number of hours but haven't completed a certificate or degree, to find where those programs are offered and linking up maybe, linking up with the college that's most accessible to them and with another college in case they don't have the degree. So I'd really like to talk to you more about that. We've been looking at having a dedicated advisor for the Virtual College of Texas, so it fits right in line with that grad Texas notion.
We're going to take an active role as at the coordinating board to help kind of steer that. We've done pockets of this in other, one school here, 7 schools here. We've sent mailers out, but we're going to take a more active role and even going to the legislature on this year to make sure they know it's something we want to do. So I would want to hear at least something about that.
One thing we did, we tried to put a stop before they walk away, and it's harder to get them back once they leave. And so when they get 24 credits, we have mandatory advising. So we take them back in and we look at them, and there's another point later, just before they get their degree, they have mandatory advising. So we've kind of thrown ourselves in front of the door. But not every school has the resources to do what you're talking about, and there's a simple thing you can start, and that's what we did a couple of years ago. Is we were in a big meeting, and we said, how many of you had applied to San Jack? And I was sitting at a table with 6 people with doctors, and we all said at the same time, well, we tried. So it tells you something, right? And so we now have come up with this idea that nobody's going to fail at our institution because of a barrier we put in place. And a lot of these are our barriers that we have the ability to take away. So if you don't have the resources to do that, I advise get all your administrators in a room and have them apply to your college. It will open their eyes real quick.
And that's what I agree. That's what the video's supposed to do. Just go to the website. How often do they go look at their own website and say?
But don't do it when you're in a SACS year.
Don't do that. That's correct.
No,
don't
no.
do it in a SACS. I agree with that. Great points. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and information. Appreciate it.
I think Jarrell was our presenter of the day because he dealt with the upside-down PowerPoint presentation. And now you know the technical answer of how many people does it figure out how to right-size the screen. Apparently it's 4. And so very, very informative session. Anything else? Questions on, you want to share anything, David? Yeah. David Gardner, the Deputy Commissioner.
You're a deputy assistant.
Yeah,
I'm the deputy. That's okay. Actually, I came in at the right minute because I'm really excited to hear what you were just talking about. Some of you know, Charles knows I've been around here a long time. And many years ago, I went to a WICHE meeting in California. And one thing WICHE has always done well is they have students on every panel. And one thing I heard from that panel, and every one of those students, no matter what the topic was, do not put unnecessary administrative barriers in front of us. Make our classes hard. Don't make it hard to get into classes. And now it seems as though in this meeting and other meetings, I'm beginning to hear that schools are catching on to the fact that unwittingly, we've all put unnecessary administrative barriers in front of students. And they have enough barriers on their own, especially at community colleges, but probably at 30 of our universities as well. Most of our universities are actually open admission. They don't like to talk about that, but they are. And so it's really important. I don't know if Darrell shared this particular number in terms of people who haven't finished their degrees. This is a university number. We have similar numbers for universities, but we had one cohort, Julie Eklund, our staff did one cohort, 11,000 students in that cohort, had 90 hours or more, had not finished a degree. Some had as many as 300 hours. The state has spent $81 million on those students, not to mention the amount of money students have spent on themselves. Now, that's just a small fraction of the students, a small number. Darrell didn't mention specifically, but we're actually asking for legislative appropriations for some staffing at the coordinating board, because one thing, we've been working on getting these students back to school for maybe since Charles Cook worked here, maybe a little after that, but a long time. And we all know they're hard to find, right? So one thing Darrell had pointed out is we need to market somehow so students know how to find us. And frankly, after personally being concerned about this for 20 years, there's some things I didn't realize. And when I looked at that 300-hour number, I realized there are probably students in that group that are already eligible for a degree in at least interdisciplinary studies for a university. 2 weeks later, I finally realized a significant number of those probably were eligible for an associate degree at a community college. And how do we make that happen? So we think we can work in a more centralized way to help you. And part of what you're talking about, even when you're talking about cost for some things, is we need to find more ways to work together on purchasing some things that are necessary. So you guys are doing transcript review. I know at San Jac, I came into the last meeting of this, I heard you talking about it, and it got me thinking. But you know, we have about 3 basic student record systems in the state. Actually, I talked to someone from the Council of University Presidents and Chancellors about this at about 1 o'clock, is maybe we could see if for each of those systems, if we could find a way to go together for institutions that are interested and purchase that software together on a state contract. Did any of you remember TechShare years ago? TechShare happened because we put state contracts in place. This was something that University of Texas at Austin already did, but they saved 30% on what they were doing, yet other schools, community colleges, small regional universities like Sul Ross were able to provide access to materials they weren't able to before. So we're going to try to work with you guys to identify, are there some things that maybe we can go together to purchase contracts on to save money and to do things that are important? Because it's evident to me, everybody is concerned about the student. Somehow we need to focus on them. They can be sort of different. We make assumptions about students sometime. I'm glad this is not one group that talks about non-traditional students, because we know those students have been around, frankly, since I was an undergraduate at University of Houston. You know, I had classes with, you know, mothers that were 20 years older than I was, and they usually had the highest grades in the class. So you guys are aware of that, but we need to find ways to work around it. And sometimes things stare us in our face. A community college vice chancellor from, I've forgotten the name of the community college in the Oakland area, told me years ago that they had discovered the #1 problem with developmental ed was the bus schedule. They had their classes scheduled, so students had to be there something like 2 hours before class and have to leave a half hour before it was over. They couldn't get the bus schedule changed, so they changed their class schedule. Sometimes these things have to hit you in your face. Sometimes you have to realize it. But I know you guys understand these things, and you also need to help us. Part of your role is not just communicating all these things you hear out back to your institutions, but let us know some things where we can do a better job of helping. You know, I used to say, I haven't said it enough lately, that we don't have a system of higher ed in Texas, but we need to act more like a system. But the only way we can do that is work together, and you guys need to help make sure we do that, and that we just not go off in some direction on our own and then unintentionally do something that helps. And some of you know that you can call me and just say, David, I think this thing you're doing, the coordinating board, doesn't make any sense at all. And if you know me, you know I'll grouse for a little bit, and then I'll come around. But anyway, I appreciate you taking time to come in today and tomorrow. The students of Texas are going to be better off for it. I don't know if it was mentioned to you earlier today. I just discovered that last year, 54% of all our graduates in Texas were economically disadvantaged. Think about that. I mean, you all deserve some applause for that. 54% of our students were economically disadvantaged. We still have a ways to go. I mean, one reason for that is most of our students are economically disadvantaged. 60% of our high school students are. But starting about, I think, 5 years ago now, the graduates between those economically advantaged and disadvantaged, the economically disadvantaged surpassed. They're still not graduating as quickly as they could. They're still graduating with more debt than they should. But we can help make that happen. So thank you, and thanks for tolerating my sort of rambling here at the end. Thank you.
Rex, any comments? Any last questions? Well, we appreciate it. Hopefully it's been a productive day. I do believe this is the first time we've ever finished early, but good deal. And we've got it scheduled to start, I think, at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll have the boardroom open and the first presentation at 8:30. And thank you for your time, and we'll see you tomorrow.